Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Gerardot couple. Jennair Gerardo was born December 19, 1970, in the city of Fort Wayne, Allen County, Indiana, USA. She spent her childhood and teenage years in the area. Jennair graduated from Bishop Luers High School, where she achieved excellent results in advanced courses. She then attended Purdue University at Indianapolis, studying communication and actively participating in the theater arts program. Later, she continued her communication studies at Butler University. Jennair earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in communication and theater arts. Throughout her career, she worked in marketing for various Indiana companies, including roles in Carmel and Indianapolis. Notably, she served as marketing manager at CIRCOR Instrumentation for several years. In the summer of 1986, Jennair met Mark Gerardot in Fort Wayne, Indiana. At the time, they were both teenagers, and Jennair was working at a local Taco Bell. Mark was immediately drawn to her, captivated by her striking blue eyes and bright smile. Mark was initially unable to express his feelings to Jennair. The romance between Mark and Jennair only really began when they met again by chance after 4 years, at a nearby shopping mall where Jennair was working. He began visiting her frequently, and one day, she encouraged him to make a move, asking him directly when he would take her out. Jennair's confidence and willingness to speak her mind drew Mark to her. He described her demeanor as the opposite of his own, admiring her boldness. Melissa Murphy, a childhood friend of Jennair's, recalled how excited Jennair was when she first met Mark, saying Jennair was convinced he was the one and would do anything for him. Mark and Jennair got married on October 23, 1993, when Mark was 25 and Jennair was 23. Their relationship, which began in adolescence, continued to flourish into adulthood. Mark reflected on their happiness together, saying he couldn't imagine spending his life with anyone else. However, like any couple, Mark and Jennair faced challenges in their marriage and had to navigate the low points together. Mark said the arguments between him and his wife were very tense, and Jennair always won because she wanted to be the one to make the final decision. Mark's high school friend, Mike Hartman, shared that although he wasn't privy to all the details of their relationship, he knew they had fierce disagreements. Despite their strong marriage, the 2008 financial crisis significantly impacted them. Mark later mentioned that it changed everything, and money became a major source of stress and arguments. In November 2011, they relocated to Greenville, South Carolina, where they found new marketing jobs. Exploring the state's beautiful landscapes brought them closer together, and their marriage experienced a renewal. However, their renewed life came to a halt in 2017. Jennair lost her job, leaving her struggling to find a new one, and she was no longer the strong, confident woman she once was. Around this time, the couple felt it was time for a change and a fresh start. They decided to move to Delaware, and Mark began looking for a job right away. He came across a job posting at the University of Delaware for a creative director in the marketing department, a role that would come with supervisory responsibilities. Mark emailed his application and quickly received a response from a woman 15 years his junior, who would be his supervisor if he got the job. She invited him for an interview. Initially, Mark was nervous about working under someone 15 years younger than him, but his worries soon disappeared after meeting Meredith Chapman. This was their first encounter. At the time, Meredith was 33 years old and originally from Pennsylvania. She had graduated from the University of Delaware with a bachelor's in communication and a master's in education. She was married to Luke, a former New York City councilman, and they lived in Fairfield Crest, Delaware, with their dog Indy. The couple had married in 2009. During his interview, Mark was immediately drawn to Meredith's beauty and intelligence. He recalled thinking, "I have to work for this person," within 5 minutes of sitting across from her. He found her articulate, energetic, and passionate about her job, and was impressed by her accomplishments at such a young age. Meredith seemed impressed by Mark, as she immediately offered him the job. Mark gratefully accepted the offer and moved to Wilmington, Delaware in November 2017. His wife, Jennair, stayed behind in South Carolina to lease out their home. Mark was excited about the new opportunity and the chance to advance his career. Unbeknownst to him, this marked the start of the demise of his marriage to Jennair. Mark spent 45 days living alone in Delaware, getting to know Meredith better. They discovered they had a lot in common, and she invited him out for a drink one evening. Mark found it easy to talk to Meredith and opened up to her about his marriage to Jennair, sharing some of his personal struggles. He also told her about the loss of his parents and brother. Mark was unaware of what was happening between him and Meredith at first. Mark stated that he really hadn't known what was happening. He admits that he feels affection for Meredith and expresses that being with her is a wonderful experience. After their dinner date, he started to understand his feelings and realized he was attracted to her. As Mark spent more time with Meredith, the issues in his marriage became more apparent. He began to compare Meredith to his wife, noting that Meredith praised him and made him feel appreciated, which was something his wife never did. Mark was really touched by Meredith's compliments. Mark was deeply attracted to Meredith, but he felt guilty about betraying his wife. As a result, he initially attempted to end his relationship with Meredith. However, he couldn't shake off the feelings he had developed for her, especially after learning that Meredith was unhappy in her own 9-year marriage. Mark explains that his relationship with Meredith is great, which made it difficult for him to shut down the relationship. He wanted to understand what drew them together. Before Jennair joined her husband in Delaware, Mark and Meredith had already confessed their love for each other. Mark felt it was natural to express his love for Meredith, as the feeling was powerful. In December 2017, Jennair moved north and noticed Mark's distant behavior. She soon confronted him, sensing that he might be involved with another woman. Jennair asked Mark what was going on with him and said that he was acting different. Jennair specifically mentioned Meredith because Mark often mentioned her when discussing new job. Although Mark initially denied the affair, Jennair continued to question him, aware that something was amiss between him and Meredith. She began to closely monitor his activities. Mark is confused as to why Jennair knows the private aspects of his affair with Meredith. Around Valentine's Day in 2008, Jennair collected evidence that her husband was having an affair. However, this came at a cost. Mark discovered that Jennair had hired a company to hack into his phone, allowing her to read his texts, view his photos, and access his call records with Meredith. Mark confessed to Jennair that he had developed feelings for Meredith, unable to continue the deception. Jennair, heartbroken but determined to save their marriage, asked Mark to attend marriage counseling with her, and he agreed. However, during their second session, Mark discovered a recording device hidden in his jacket. Initially thinking it was an anti-theft device, he realized it was actively recording him. Furious, Mark confronted Jennair. She claimed she wanted to understand the extent of his relationship with Meredith and suspected they were planning something together. This has been marked the beginning of the end for Mark and Jennair's marriage. Mark eventually told Jennair that he intended to file for divorce in May 2018, once he had met the residency requirements in Delaware and could leave their shared home. During this period, Meredith Chapman's life was on an upward trajectory. She had landed a new role as assistant vice president at Villanova University in Pennsylvania and relocated to Radnor Township. Meanwhile, her marriage was coming to an end, paving the way for her to pursue a relationship with Mark. As Meredith and Mark's relationship deepened, Jennair, was Mark's wife at that time, began consulting with divorce coach Sheila Brennan. Jennair was struggling with feelings of bitterness and anger, stemming from being replaced by a younger woman. Her concerns were compounded by financial uncertainty, having moved north without securing a new job. Jennair's situation continued to deteriorate, ultimately taking a toll on her mental health. Mark noticed her distress and suggested that she see a psychiatrist for professional help. He also encouraged her to reach out to family and friends, as she had mentioned suicidal thoughts and even threatened to jump out of a window. Mark stated that Jennair appeared to have come to terms with their upcoming divorce. She walked up to him with a list of things she wanted him to do in the weeks before he officially moved out. Her requests included activities such as going on hikes, having dinner together, and generally spending quality time as a couple. Mark agreed to fulfill her requests, thinking it would help Jennair be in a better emotional state. During this time, Jennair appeared to be acting normally, although she would occasionally become emotional and break down in tears. Over the next few weeks, Jennair started posting on the app Nextdoor. She was looking for recommendations for a good marriage counselor who could help couples that were close to getting a divorce. In her post, Jennair specified that they needed a counselor with extensive education and experience in handling complex issues such as infidelity, depression, traumatic experiences, and child-parent dynamics. However, unbeknownst to Mark, Jennair had secretly been planning her revenge. On the night of April 23, 2018, Mark and his wife Jennair were scheduled to meet at a restaurant to discuss their divorce agreement. However, Jennair sent Mark a series of messages, first saying she was running late, then telling him to go home as she wouldn't make it to the. Mark got up to leave, but minutes later, he received a disturbing picture from Jennair, an image of trash with a condom in the middle. This led him to believe Jennair was rummaging through Meredith's trash can outside her home. More text messages followed, including one that said he had ruined co-life. Jennair's next messages were even more ominous, saying she hoped he never found happiness and she had said goodbye to Mark. Alarmed and fearing for Meredith's safety, Mark tried to contact Meredith multiple times, but all his calls and texts went unanswered. Worried about a confrontation between Jennair and Meredith, Mark rushed to Meredith's house. What he found was far more horrific than he had anticipated. Upon arrival, he discovered Meredith lying face down on her kitchen floor. Around her head was a pool of blood. Nearby, he also found Jennair's lifeless body on the floor. Mark shouted in shock and ran to Meredith. He said, "Baby, oh baby, what have you done?" Meredith had excitedly posted on her Instagram about her new job at Villanova less than 2 hours before she died, expressing her excitement. According to Meredith's 5:42 p.m. post, after just 1 week on the job, she's already earned the love of fans at NOA Nation. Later that evening, she arrived at her home on Lowry Lane in Radnor Township, parked her Audi in the driveway, opened the door, and walked inside, unaware that Jennair had broken in and was hiding, waiting to attack her. When Mark got there, Tim, one of Meredith's neighbors, was present. He mentioned that he heard a commotion and went out to see what happened. Mark asked him to call 911. Sergeant Christopher Four of the Radnor Township Police Department said the call made his heart sink. Sergeant Christopher said they don't usually get calls like this. When they arrived, the scene was chaotic with a lot of police present. Mark, who appeared out of breath according to Christopher, was put in an ambulance before being taken to the police station as a suspect. After questioning Mark and discovering that the gun used in the 2 deaths was under Jennair's body, the police concluded that Jennair had broken into Meredith's home, killed her, and then committed suicide. The police received a tip from witness, who claimed to see a woman in a trench coat, hat, sunglasses, and possibly a wig watching the house with binoculars. They also found a set of car keys at the crime scene that were traced to a Cadillac rented by Jennair. Mark was surprised to learn about the Cadillac. He said he learned most of this from the police and the news. Jennair had rented the car 2 weeks before the incident, and it was parked just outside their apartment. Mark continued his investigation by examining his wife's bank statements, phone records, and computer backups, discovering that she was leading a double life. After Mark confessed to his affair shortly after Valentine's Day, he found out that Jennair had opened a secret bank account and credit cards. She used these cards to buy audio surveillance equipment, a lock-picking kit, computer hacking software, and DNA testing kits for his clothes. Mark also revealed that she purchased advanced GPS tracking devices and attached them to both his and Meredith's cars. Mark stated that he had found over 400 images of private conversations between Meredith and him from text and Snapchat, and that Jennair would access his phone in the middle of the night. On March 20, 2018, 5 weeks before committing the murder, Jennair bought the gun she used in the murder and suicide. Her credit card statements showed that she practiced shooting the gun 3 times at a firing range. Mark claimed that Jennair had secretly placed several recording devices in his clothes. He discovered files containing hundreds of hours of audio recordings his wife had not only recorded but also transcribed into notebooks. According to Mark, Jennair had taken all his jackets and embedded multiple devices, constantly switching them in and out. Every day, she would remove a device, download the recorded content, and then sew it back into his jacket, repeating this process for weeks. It was revealed that on the night Jennair killed Meredith and herself, she emailed a letter to her family, chillingly explaining her motive. She had begun the letter weeks prior, dating her entries, and described how it was an act of revenge for what he had done to her, saying, "That's as simple as it gets." Dr. Robbie Ludwig, a psychotherapist who studied marriage-related homicides and Red Letter, suggested that Jennair may have been driven to kill Meredith and herself because she could not bear losing Mark. Dr. Robin commented that, in his opinion, there was something about listening to the recordings that made Jennair angry and upset. Dr. Robin went on to say that Jennair found the strength to act because she believed that her suspicions about her husband's character were correct. However, when she became suicidal and lost hope in life, she became more dangerous. It seemed that she had arranged everything to make her husband suffer. In a TV interview with Dr. Ozark, Mark shared a shocking revelation. Jennair had written a 15-page letter, confessing that if he had walked in on the crime scene, she would have killed him as well. He acknowledged that he had hurt Jennair, and his greatest regret was making her feel trapped and without options. He deeply wished he could travel back in time and erase the hurt he had caused. He confessed that his love for Jennair had remained strong and never disappeared. Mark explained that he drove by Meredith's house multiple times as a way to cope with his emotions and come to terms with what had happened, helping him to process his feelings and move on. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Kaler family. James Craig Kaler was born in Weatherford, Texas in 1963, and his future wife, Karen Kaler, was born in the same city 2 years later. They met in the early 1980s while attending a university in Texas. At the time, Craig was a senior studying engineering, and Karen was a freshman in the humanities department. Despite their different fields of study, they quickly discovered common interests and started a romantic relationship. After graduating, they had a small, intimate wedding with close friends and family. They welcomed their first child, Emily, in 1991, followed by Lauren in 1993. The family lived in a cozy house in Weatherford and enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle, with a higher-than-average income for their area. In 1999, Craig received a lucrative job offer from a major utility company in Weatherford, which coincided with the birth of their son, Sean. Craig adored his son and, with his increased salary, purchased a spacious house in the city's most prestigious neighborhood and a family car. Karen stayed at home to care for their children, and Craig became the primary breadwinner. From the outside, their family appeared to be living a perfect life. Their 3 children have also had many successes in their fields. Emily and Lauren are talented in sports and music. Emily studies at a prestigious pharmacy college and Lauren hopes to attend a conservatory. Sean, on the other hand, showed a keen interest in mathematics and had dreams of becoming an archaeologist. The family's home life seemed idyllic, Craig providing for the family and Karen taking care of the household and raising the children. However, the family was struggling with hidden problems. In 2007, Karen confided in her sister Linda, revealing that she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown due to Craig's controlling behavior. Craig exerted total control over Karen's daily life, demanding a detailed account of every expense, no matter how small, and requiring her to report her whereabouts at all times. The family lives on a strict schedule, with Craig setting their daily routines, including bedtime, wake-up time, meal times. This rigidity makes Karen feel suffocated and trapped. Over time, Craig's need for control grew stronger. He became more demanding and selfish, scheduling Karen's every move. She felt like she had no time left for herself, there was only duty to complete. Karen tried to meet her husband's demands, hoping he would ease up and they could return to their normal life. However, Craig seemed to enjoy exerting control and refused to change. Linda was extremely worried about her sister's confide. Like everyone else, she saw Craig as the ideal husband, father, and family man, only to discover he was a controlling man. Despite this, Karen didn't want to break up her family. Additionally, she and her children relied on Craig financially. So, she decided to find a job that would give her a stable income. She joined a local gym without telling her husband, using it as an escape to clear her mind and work through her emotions. She spent several hours there every day, scheduling her time around her husband Craig's work schedule so he wouldn't notice. Not long after, the gym manager noticed her because of her attractive appearance, excellent fitness, and her hard work. Karen was given the chance to work as a fitness with the possibility of a permanent contract. This was a dream come true for her, as she could now get paid for doing something she loved. However, she was worried about how her husband, Craig, would react when he found out. When Craig found out about Karen's new job, she thought he would be angry and forbid her to continue. Surprisingly, he received this news calmly and even seemed pleased that she had found a way to make money on her own. He had a few conditions. She had to be home when he arrived, cook meals, and not let her new job interfere with their intimate life. Karen found these conditions acceptable, as she now had more freedom and independence. As Karen settled into her new job, she met a new instructor named Sonny Reese, and they quickly became friends. For Karen, who had spent years at home with little social interaction, Sonny became a trusted confidant. The two women spent time together at work, went for walks, had coffee, and shared heartfelt conversations. But little did Karen know, this new friendship would soon lead to unexpected romance and a complicated love triangle. It didn't take long for Karen and Sonny's friendship to evolve into a romantic relationship. At first, they kept their feelings a secret from everyone. However, after some time, Karen decided it was necessary to be honest with her husband, Craig. She spent months preparing for this conversation, searching for the right words and worrying about the potential consequences. Eventually, she confessed to Craig. Craig's reaction to his wife's revelation was surprisingly calm. However, the next day, he made an unexpected condition for accepting Karen's relationship with Sonny, which was that he wanted to be a part of it. Karen was shocked and unsure of how to respond to her husband's talk. Nevertheless, Craig took the initiative and began wooing Sonny, sending her flowers and gifts. He seemed to view this as an opportunity to revitalize his intimate life and bring new passion to his marriage. Initially, Karen and Sonny agreed to Craig's proposal. However, they soon realized that his intentions were aimed at domination. However, their unusual love triangle was short-lived. Craig demanded that Karen end the affair immediately. Despite this, Karen continued to see Sonny, as she had genuinely fallen in love. After almost 20 years of marriage, Karen seemed ready to leave her husband for someone new. This led to a series of secret actions, including moving to another state, scheduling secret meetings. In an attempt to salvage his family, Craig thought it best to relocate to another state. He started job hunting, sending out his resume, and soon secured a role as a water director for a large company in Columbia, Missouri, not far from Kansas. Craig hoped that by moving to a new state, his wife's affair with Sonny would end, and their family life would normalize. However, the summer 2008 move proved challenging for the family, as the kids had to switch schools, make new friends, and adapt to a new city. Although the family was already financially comfortable, Craig's new job nearly doubled his previous salary from Weatherford. Despite his increased responsibilities and work hours, Craig mistakenly believed he had successfully removed Sonny from his wife's life. However, Karen and Sonny continued to communicate regularly through calls, texts, and secret meetings. They would meet halfway, spend a couple of hours in a roadside hotel, and then return home. At this point, Karen realized her marriage was over. She no longer loved Craig, and it was only a matter of time before they divorced. These clandestine meetings persisted until December 2008. At the New Year's Eve celebration that year, the Kaler family went back to their hometown to reconnect with relatives and friends. Sonny was also in attendance at the gathering. Initially, Karen and Sonny kept a low profile, merely exchanging greetings. As the celebration continues and the alcohol slowly affects Karen and Sonny's behavior, they seem to have no regard for social norms. They became inseparable, openly showing affection by holding hands, sharing romantic glances, they even kissed. Craig's anger boiled over into fury after Karen publicly humiliated him by revealing her affair at a party attended by dozens of acquaintances. He lashed out at Karen and Sonny before dragging Karen away from the party. In his rage, Craig lost control and physically assaulted Karen, ripping her dress and slapping her, causing her to fall and hit her head. The incident marked the beginning of the end of their marriage. A few days later, Karen announced she was leaving Craig and initiated divorce proceedings, seeking custody of their children. Initially, Craig attempted to apologize and salvage their relationship for the sake of the children. But Karen was resolute. She said they should divorce, causing Craig to contact friends and family, begging them to convince Karen to reconsider. In the spring of 2009, Craig and Karen's marriage continued to deteriorate. Despite Craig's attempts to salvage their relationship, Karen made it clear she was leaving him for Sonny and she had never been truly happy in their marriage. The tension between them escalated into physical violence, with Craig grabbing Karen during an argument, leaving bruises on her arms. Karen reported the incident to the police, leading to Craig's arrest. After the incident, Karen took the children and moved out without waiting for the divorce to be finalized. Craig was devastated by her departure and even more so when he discovered that his daughters, Emily and Lauren, were siding with their mother. They told him that they had never seen their mother so happy, which Craig perceived as a betrayal. As a result, he cut off contact with his daughters, only spending time with his son Sean on weekends. Despite the ongoing divorce proceedings, Craig held on to the hope that Karen would change her mind and return to him. His desire to control her led him to engage in jealous behavior, including stalking her and attempting to install a hidden camera in her home. To pursue this, Craig sacrificed his work, initially taking vacation time, then claiming illness, and eventually skipping work altogether without explanation. This reckless behavior resulted in Craig's termination from his job. Without a steady income, he was forced to move in with his parents as he could no longer afford to live on his own. With ample free time, Craig began stalking Karen, prompting her to take him to court to obtain a restraining order. In November 2009, just before Thanksgiving, Karen took her children to visit their 89-year-old grandmother, Dorothy White, in Burlingame, Kansas. On the evening of November 29th, the Burlingame police received a distress call about a suspicious van and reports of gunshots. Dorothy's neighbors reported witnessing a small truck pull up to her house. A man exit the vehicle and enter the house. They claimed to have heard screams and gunshots, but were uncertain. The man then left the house, got back into the truck, and sped away. The neighbors did not attempt to apprehend him, fearing he was armed. When police arrived, they were met by 10-year-old Sean Kaler, who was frantically calling for help. Although Sean was unable to explain what had happened, it was clear that a horrific scene awaited the police. Inside the home, near the front door, Sonny was found lying in a pool of blood but surprisingly still alive despite having 2 gunshot wounds. In the kitchen, police discovered the lifeless body of 44-year-old Karen, who had been shot in the chest and then fatally shot at close range in the head. The body of her oldest daughter, 18-year-old Emily, was found between a wall and a couch. It appeared that Emily had attempted to hide from her enraged father but was caught and killed with 2 point-blank shots. Lauren, found in a pool of blood in the second-floor bedroom, was still alive but weakly called for help and repeatedly said that her father was the one who did it. Dorothy and Lauren were rushed to a nearby hospital's intensive care unit. Despite the doctor's efforts, Lauren died on December 1st due to massive blood loss and internal organ damage. Her great-grandmother passed away a few hours later. Sean, the only surviving witness, was in shock. Psychologists worked with him, but a thorough interrogation was necessary as he was the only living witness to the tragic events at his great-grandmother's house. Sean recounted that evening, stating that his mother was in the kitchen preparing dinner when he approached her to ask for his favorite pie. Suddenly, the back door swung open, and his father entered with a shotgun, pointing it at Karen without a word. He shot her, then moved closer and fired again. Sean was initially frozen in horror. His father then turned to Sean but didn't aim the gun. Instead, Craig stared at Sean silently and intently. Sean realized he had to escape. So he jumped out the open back door. He ran towards the main entrance, hoping to alert his grandmother, sisters, and call for help. However, upon reaching the threshold, he heard several more gunshots. Fearing what he might find inside, Sean hid in a small outbuilding. He heard more gunshots and waited in terror, afraid that his father would come after him. Craig Kaler was immediately added to the wanted list, with a warning that he was armed and extremely dangerous. As police received multiple reports of a speeding truck, they were able to quickly determine the direction the gunman was heading. At one point, Craig abandoned his vehicle in a wooded area and began walking down a deserted road. Law enforcement soon caught up with him and apprehended him the next morning. Upon arrest, police found the rifle and ammunition in the back seat of the abandoned vehicle, along with prescription medication for depression and anxiety disorders near the driver's seat. Craig did not resist arrest and appeared confused and frightened. He admitted to being armed with a gun and a hunting knife, but claimed he did not intend to use them. He also acknowledged that he had done something terrible, which he believed the police already knew about. At the police station, Craig fully confessed to his crimes and opened up to the investigating officer. He shared how his wife had cheated on him with someone named Sonny and how they had humiliated him in front of friends at a New Year's Eve party. He explained how his attempts to save his marriage had cost him his job and what was left of his self-respect. Craig became emotional, stating that he didn't know how he had decided to take such drastic action and felt that everyone, including his daughters, had betrayed him. Craig's trial started in December 2010. Craig, advised by his lawyer Thomas Heaney, retracted his initial confession. He claimed his actions were due to mental illness and insanity, which was his only defense to avoid the death penalty for the murder of 4 people. Heaney argued that Craig was in a fragile mental state following a series of personal setbacks. His wife had left him for someone else, his children sided with their mother, he lost his job, and had to move back in with his parents. According to Heaney, these factors led to a breakdown, and Craig committed the crime while insane, without realizing what he was doing. However, the prosecution found no evidence of insanity or an altered mental state in Craig's actions. They argued that his actions were calculated, as he had purchased guns and ammunition in advance and went to the victim's house knowing his family was there. He shot each victim twice, ensuring no chance of survival, but intentionally spared his son Sean, allowing him to escape. In August 2011, Craig was found guilty on all counts and received a death sentence. At the final hearing, 12-year-old Sean testified, stating that he didn't want his father to die, as he was his only remaining close relative. Despite multiple appeals by Craig and his lawyers, the verdict has remained unchanged. As of today, Craig is still in prison, fighting to have the case reviewed and the death sentence overturned. After the death of his mother and sisters, Sean moved in with his grandmother. Now Sean has grown up and he has completed his studies and chosen to stay and work in his hometown. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Leslie Palacio. The next major breakthrough came when Eric's car was spotted in Moreno Valley, California. Police eventually contacted Eric's cousin, who reported that he had driven Jose and his son to San Pedro, where they planned to cross the border into Mexico. The Las Vegas Police Department requested assistance from the FBI because they could not resolve the jurisdictional issue on their own. The investigation slowed down in January 2021, but for months after the discovery of the girl's remains, Eric's father, Jose, turned himself in at the border, and everyone was greatly relieved that at least one fugitive was now in custody. The man was quickly extradited back to Clark County and charged with destruction of evidence and accessory to murder. During interrogations, Jose tried to minimize his involvement in the crime, explaining the story of the trip to Mexico by his son's strange behavior on the morning of August 29th. However, investigators showed surveillance video footage that debunked his false claims, clearly showing him helping carry Leslie's body out of the house and washing the driveway. Faced with the evidence, Jose changed his testimony. He said he was working in the garage when Eric brought Leslie's body, wrapped in a sheet, into the garage. According to Jose, he panicked and helped his son load the body into the truck, assuming that Leslie had died of an overdose of illegal drugs because he saw no visible injuries on the body. Court documents indicate that Jose initially told police that, according to Eric, Leslie died of an overdose of illegal drugs. Jose also explained that Eric immediately talked about wanting to end his life, and he decided that the best thing to do for his son was to take him to Mexico. When investigators asked Jose for Eric's current whereabouts, he explained that as soon as the two of them entered Mexico and boarded the bus was searched by Mexican authorities. He and his son got scared and decided to split up, thinking that apart, it would be harder for the authorities to find them. For this reason, he would love to help the investigation, but has absolutely no idea where his son might be. On June 18, 2021, Jose formally pleaded guilty to destruction of evidence and accessory to murder. Despite the horrific characteristics of his crimes, Jose was sentenced to only 2 years in the Clark County Detention Center, causing shock and dismay in the community. The Palacio family was shocked and outraged by Jose's lenient sentence, which they felt was unjust. During the pandemonium, Jose joined the court proceedings virtually, while Leslie's family and friends attended in person. They urged the judge to impose a harsher sentence, arguing that 2 years was not enough for an accessory to murder who helped dispose of the body and hid the perpetrator. Jose pleaded guilty and tried to apologize to the Palacio family, saying his love for his son outweighed him. He expressed regret for his actions, but the Palacio family did not accept his apology, and did not consider it since, to date, Eric's whereabouts remain unknown, and he continues to live a free life in Mexico. Jose was released on April 28, 2022. Ofalia Markarian, the attorney and representative of the Palcio family, commented that she is absolutely furious and that this is simply unfair. Not only is the main suspect not in custody, but the one who was involved in covering up the murder is back in custody after serving only 8 months and 15 days over the past 3 years. The Palcio family has never gotten justice, and Leslie's story highlights the flaws in the justice system and raises questions about fairness in dealing with serious crimes. The Palcio family is determined to fight to change the law in Nevada because they believe that whoever was involved in the murder should receive a longer prison sentence than 2 years. They hope that the perpetrator will be found and prosecuted in the United States, where he will be charged and given the punishment he deserves. Ofalia Markarian is directly reaching out to those who may know of Eric's whereabouts in Mexico, and in every media interview she calls for the Palcio family to be given a small measure of justice. Leslie's discovery of her calling was unexpected, but she soon became an integral part of the team. Her colleagues regarded her as a responsible, professional lab technician and a warm, responsive person. While her duties involved conducting various analyses and tests, Leslie saw her role as more than just fulfilling duties. She was driven to make the testing process as comfortable as possible for patients. Her caring and patient nature created an atmosphere of trust, putting even the most apprehensive individuals at ease. When a young nurse asked if Leslie was afraid of getting her hands pierced all the time, she replied with a laugh that she now had a super ability to poke people. Her optimistic vitality was evident in every action. By all accounts, Leslie had the unique potential to become a sought-after specialist in medical laboratory diagnostics, and she would have, if not for a dramatic turn of events. Since childhood, Leslie had been accustomed to helping and caring for others. As the second of 5 daughters, she took on a maternal role when her mother, Rosilia Palacio, worked as a hotel cleaner. Rosilia remembered Leslie kicking her out of the kitchen when she tried to cook dinner after cleaning over 15 hotel rooms in a shift, gently urging her to rest. Leslie took it upon herself to prepare dinners, finding cooking to be a source of inspiration. From then on, she made sure her family members were well fed, even when she was away, calling home to ensure everyone had eaten. For Leslie, family was her top priority, and she easily inspired her sisters with her energy and ideas. Even during the pandemic, Leslie didn't let her love of sports fade away. She organized workouts in her backyard and taught her mom various exercises. She also danced daily in front of the mirror with her sister to music. Leslie's passion for experimenting with hair colors and image inspired her to create a joint business plan with her older sister to open a boutique. They started designing and sewing dresses at home in their own unique style. When Rosilia got laid off due to downsizing during the pandemic, Leslie suggested that her mom start her own small cleaning company. She promised to help her mom with cleaning services in her free time from work and school. At a family council, Leslie reassured her mom, "We'll be fine soon, you'll see." They came up with a name for the company, Palacio Cleaning Service. Leslie's dreams were finally taking shape as their family firm landed its first contract. But on August 29, 2020, all their plans and dreams came to a halt. By the end of August 2020, Leslie had completed the lab assistant program, and the family firm received a large order. Feeling stressed and worried, Leslie decided it was time to take a break and enjoy an evening of dancing and fun. With pandemic restrictions slowly lifting and Las Vegas coming alive, she felt it was the perfect time to unwind. Leslie's friends refused to accompany her, even though people were gradually overcoming their fears and returning to their normal routines. They were still uneasy about being in crowded, enclosed spaces. Despite this, Leslie remained hopeful of finding someone to share a fun evening with, so she posted on Instagram about her desire to do something unexpected. To her surprise, Eric Rangel Ibarra responded to her post. Leslie and Eric's families had attended the same church for 14 years and occasionally socialized, making them childhood acquaintances, though they had never been close. Leslie was aware of Eric's interests and had received friendly texts from him in the past, but she had never reciprocated his attention. She had always been polite to him, though. Ordinarily, Leslie would have turned down Eric's offer to keep her company, but this time, she was eager to break the monotony of her daily life with a fun evening, so she decided to accept his proposal. Leslie's friends were busy, so she took Eric up on his offer to share Las Vegas nightlife stories. Despite some unease, she decided going out with Eric was better than staying solo. Leslie regularly checked in with her sister, detailing her whereabouts and activities. When she mentioned Eric wasn't drinking, Kayla joked about healthy living. Eric and Leslie's first destination was the casino at the Longhorn Hotel. They arrived at 1:31 a.m. on August 29th in Eric's white Ford F-250, as shown by the surveillance footage reviewed by the police later. The couple spent about 25 minutes inside the casino, leaving at 1:56 a.m. After their casino visit, Leslie kept her sister updated on their activities, sending a message at 4:40 a.m. However, Leslie's next message was alarming, saying, "I need to talk to you about something shitty." Her sister inquired about the issue, but Leslie didn't respond. Instead, a text box appeared, indicating that Leslie had started to type a response, but never sent it. Unfortunately, this was the last message Leslie sent during her lifetime. The following morning, Leslie still hadn't returned home, and her family grew increasingly worried as the hours passed. Initially, they assumed Leslie had spent the night at Eric's house, but as time went on, their confusion deepened. Eventually, the family decided to check on Leslie at Eric's house, where they stumbled upon a suspicious scene. Eric's mother and daughter were removing furniture, pretending they had only just learned that Leslie and Eric had been together the previous evening. Fortunately, Leslie's family arrived at Eric's house just in time, preventing a significant delay in the investigation. The police found bloodstains in the house and a messy bedroom, suggesting that Eric's mother and sister had spent the day packing up their belongings, including furniture, instead of cleaning up evidence of a crime. This indicated that they were not going on a short trip, but rather planning a long-term absence, likely to reunite with Eric and his father, Jose, who had fled to Mexico to avoid prosecution. When Mrs. Ibarra met the Palazzo family, she likely realized their chance to escape had passed, and the panicked mother and daughter began denying any knowledge of Leslie's evening with Eric. Their suspicious behavior aroused suspicion that something serious had occurred. Luckily, the Las Vegas police acted quickly, issuing a billing inquiry to track Leslie's movements from the previous night. Although it took time to receive the data, the Palazzo family didn't wait and launched a campaign to spread the word about Leslie's disappearance. The community responded, sharing the information on social media, and surprisingly, many people, including Eric's mom, showed they cared. Detectives continued to question Mrs. Ibarra, seeking more information, and on August 31st, she went to the police station to file a missing persons report for her husband and son. Mrs. Ibarra claimed that her son, Eric, had left their home late on the evening of August 28th, returning the next morning, behaving strangely. She watched as he walked out the door again, but this time, he never came back. Police probed Leslie's disappearance and that of Eric and his dad. The Las Vegas police joined the case, searching for clues. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, seeking surveillance cameras. They found cameras at a house opposite Jose Barr's home, which might yield crucial evidence. They also obtained billing records, tracking Leslie's movements on August 29th, shedding light on the mystery. Detectives discovered that the couple visited a casino and then went to a grill bar, arriving around 2:15 a.m. Leslie's cell phone was left behind at the bar, and records show that she left the establishment around 5:50 a.m. Shortly after, at 6:05 a.m., neighborhood cameras captured Eric's car pulling up to their family home. The footage clearly showed that Leslie was heavily intoxicated as Eric assisted her out of the car and into the house. Later at 7:25 a.m., Eric and his father Jose were seen carrying Leslie's body, wrapped in a sheet, out of the house and placing it in the trunk of the car. Eric then drove away, while Jose hosed down the driveway to their house. This suggested that Eric and Jose were not missing persons, but rather fugitives trying to avoid justice. After reviewing the footage, police obtained a search warrant for Eric's home, leading to the discovery of additional evidence indicating that Leslie did not leave the house voluntarily. The house had been cleaned with strong cleaning products in an attempt to conceal evidence, and latex gloves and trash bags were also found. Furthermore, traces of blood were discovered on the floor and bed in Eric's room, strongly suggesting an assault. Without DNA testing, it was evident to investigators that the blood belonged to Leslie. From that point on, the search for Leslie Palau focused on finding her body. Meanwhile, Eric and Jose were reported missing, and investigators worked to identify suspects. The Palacio family, shaken by the events, also took action. Roselia, Leslie's mother, reached out to the church community for help in searching for her daughter's body. As a result, search volunteers, flyers, and posters featuring Leslie's photo and images of Eric and Jose began circulating on social media, in newspapers, and on street poles. The family appealed to the public to assist in finding the two men involved in Leslie's death. The first significant breakthrough in the investigation came when a license plate reader detected Eric's car just 6 miles from his home at 10 a.m., about 4 hours after Leslie's alleged murder. This discovery led investigators to believe that the body might be hidden within a 4-hour drive from Eric's home, possibly on the Nevada-Arizona border or in the Charleston Peak area. This was still a vast region, and detectives were eager for any additional information that could help them pinpoint a more specific location. Once again, luck was on their side when a gas station 40 miles north of Las Vegas captured footage of Eric's car pulling off the highway toward the Valley of Fire National Park. 20 minutes later, the car reappeared with muddy tires. This discovery narrowed the search area and indicated that the body was likely to be found within 20 miles of the gas station. The presence of mud on the tires suggested that Eric had driven off the road at some point. Detectives searched the area, and on September 9th, during a second search, they found Leslie Palau's body hidden behind a bush. News outlets immediately broke the story. The body of 22-year-old Leslie Palacio had been found near the Valley of Fire 11 days after she went missing. A reporter joined the broadcast, providing additional details about the prime suspect, 25-year-old Eric Rangel Ibarra. The Valley of Fire, where the body was found, is known for its extremely hot climate, which led to rapid decomposition of the remains. As a result, forensic experts were unable to determine the exact cause of death. Locals were horrified and fearful after Leslie's death, with some becoming too afraid to venture outside due to the constant thoughts of the notorious criminals involved in the murder. The day after Leslie's body was found, September 10th, a large crowd comprising friends, relatives, neighbors, and local residents gathered to pay their respects to her memory. They took the candles used in the nightly vigil and placed them in front of her house, expressing their desire for the perpetrator to face justice for his heinous act. At this point, the quest for justice was far from over. A major breakthrough in the case came when Eric's car was spotted in Moreno Valley, California. This led police to contact Eric's cousin, who revealed that he had driven Jose and his son to San Pedro, where they intended to cross the border into Mexico. The Las Vegas Police Department requested the FBI's assistance due to jurisdictional issues they couldn't resolve on their own. Although the investigation slowed down in January 2021, there was a significant development months after the girls' remains were discovered. Eric's father, Jose, turned himself in at the border, bringing relief that at least one fugitive was now in custody. Jose was quickly extradited back to Clark County, where he was charged with destroying evidence and being an accessory to murder. During questioning, Jose attempted to downplay his role in the crime, citing his son's strange behavior on the morning of August 29th as the reason for their trip to Mexico. However, investigators presented surveillance video footage that contradicted his false claims, clearly showing him helping to carry Leslie's body out of the house and washing the driveway. Jose altered his testimony when confronted with the evidence. According to his revised account, he was working in the garage when Eric arrived with Leslie's body, wrapped in a sheet. Jose claimed he panicked and helped his son load the body into the truck, believing Leslie had died from a drug overdose due to the lack of visible injuries. Initially, Jose told police that Eric had stated Leslie died from a drug overdose. Jose also recalled that Eric had suicidal thoughts and, as a concerned father, decided to take him to Mexico. When questioned about Eric's current location, Jose explained that after crossing into Mexico and boarding a bus, they were searched by Mexican authorities. Feeling frightened, they decided to separate, thinking it would be harder for authorities to track them down. As a result, Jose was willing to cooperate with the investigation, but genuinely had no idea where his son was. On June 18, 2021, Jose pleaded guilty to destroying evidence and being an accessory to murder. Despite the heinous nature of his crimes, he was sentenced to just 2 years at the Clark County Detention Center, a decision that shocked and outraged the community. The Palcio family was particularly appalled by the lenient sentence, which they considered unfair. During the sentencing hearing, Jose participated virtually, while Leslie's family and friends attended in person. They implored the judge to impose a harsher sentence, arguing that 2 years was insufficient punishment for an accessory to murder who had helped dispose of the body and conceal the perpetrator. Jose apologized to the Palcio family, stating that his love for his son had outweighed his moral obligations. He expressed remorse for his actions, but the Palcio family rejected his apology, citing that Eric's whereabouts remain unknown to this day, and he continues to live freely in Mexico. Jose was released from detention on April 28, 2022. Ofalia Markarian, the Palcio family's attorney and representative, is outraged over the glaring injustice in the handling of Leslie's murder case. Despite the primary suspect remaining at large, the individual who aided in covering up the crime has been released from custody after serving a mere 8 months and 15 days over the past 3 years. The Palcio family is still awaiting justice, and Leslie's story highlights the flaws in the justice system, sparking concerns about the fairness of handling serious crimes. The family is determined to push for legal reform in Nevada, advocating for those involved in the murder to face longer prison sentences than 2 years. They hope the perpetrator will be found and prosecuted in the United States, where they will receive the punishment they deserve. Through media interviews, Ofalia Markarian is making a direct appeal to anyone with information about Eric's whereabouts in Mexico, urging them to come forward so the Palcio family can finally receive some measure of justice. Hello friends. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of the Ortega family. Born in March 1986, Paula was the second child in a large family. She excelled at Dario Figaro Alara School and later attended the Polytechnic University, where she developed a keen interest in the hospitality industry. After her studies, Paula actively contributed to the growth of her family's business, which specialized in party goods manufacturing. The Ortega Alcocer family was well-to-do and renowned in Sangolquí and neighboring Ecuadorian towns. Paula's dad built a successful party goods business in Ecuador, producing balloons, piñatas, and more. The family opened stores in Sangolquí and Quito, with each member contributing. Paula managed a store and started a party planning service which flourished, bringing joy to people and fulfilling her. Paula Ortega's personal life struggled despite her family's business success. Her first marriage to Carlos Pedro was unhappy due to his alcoholism, infidelity, and theft. After their daughter's birth, Carlos's behavior worsened, leading Paula to end the marriage. With family support and her passion for work, Paula regained a sense of normalcy and hope. A decade after her previous experiences, Paula met Christian Diego, a tall, dark-haired, and handsome man who was 4 years her junior. Despite having lost faith in finding a worthy partner, Paula was initially cautious around Christian, who was persistent in his pursuit of her. However, Christian soon won her over with his calm and reliable nature, forming a strong bond with Paula's daughter, which greatly impressed her. After 2 years of dating, Paula's heart finally warmed up to Christian, and they decided to tie the knot in a beautiful wedding ceremony. Christian took on a paternal role, embracing Paula's daughter as his own, and soon they welcomed another daughter, Maria, into their family. During their 5-year marriage, Christian fully integrated into Paula's father's company, taking on a key role in finding locations for new stores. This job frequently required him to travel, leaving Paula and their daughters at home. Coming from a humble working-class background, Christian had always harbored ambitions of owning a large business one day. Unfortunately, some individuals are skilled at hiding their dark side, and it's possible to live alongside ruthless criminals for years without ever suspecting a thing. But the truth always has a way of revealing itself, often in the most unexpected and explosive ways. Paula Ortega and her husband Christian seemed like the perfect couple to those around them, with a happy and successful relationship. But beneath the surface, things were not as they appeared. After Paula's father passed away in 2020 following a long illness, the family's business began to fall apart. Christian, driven by a desire for power and wealth, tried to take Paula's father's place, but his lack of business skills led to a string of failed deals. Frustrated, Christian started taking out his anger on his family, initially in secret, but soon openly abandoning them for a life of partying and recklessness. Without Paula's father to keep him in check, Christian's true nature began to emerge, marked by a string of affairs and heavy drinking. Paula was determined not to repeat the mistakes of her previous traumatic marriage, and she refused to tolerate Christian's abusive behavior. Their home had become a war zone, with Christian's true nature, an ambitious egoist who craved power and obedience, on full display. After a particularly vicious argument, Paula secretly filed for divorce, fearing Christian's reaction. However, when Christian discovered her plans, his behavior abruptly changed. Desperate to maintain his position in the family and avoid losing his comfortable lifestyle, he reformed his ways and appeared to transform for the better. He expressed remorse, claiming to be confused and overwhelmed, and professed his love and appreciation for his family. Paula, still hesitant to be alone again, was convinced by Christian's eloquence to give him another chance. Christian suggested a romantic dinner at home, and Paula agreed, sending their daughters to her parents' house to prepare for the evening. Despite her reservations, she was excited to recreate a happy family atmosphere. The evening at the Ortega home was filled with celebration and comfort. The living room was decorated with festive garlands, and the dining table was warmly lit by candles. Christian poured a bottle of dry white wine while Paula served a hot meal. The night seemed to be a genuine step towards reconciliation, until Christian suddenly made a shocking proposal that disrupted the peaceful atmosphere. Christian confessed to his wife a costly mistake in his bid to take over the family business, causing significant losses. The company now needed a new investor, which would mean giving up part of the firm. Paula refused to consider it, wanting her father's business to stay in the family. Despite his efforts, she wouldn't budge, leaving Christian frustrated and their relationship strained. On January 2, 2023, Paula took her daughter to the playroom before preparing for work at her shop. She had a large order to fulfill, involving balloon fountains and party decorations. During lunch, 2 slim men in dark hoodies arrived. Paula opened the door, expecting a courier. The men startled her, scanned the shop, and pinned her against the wall. Just as things got tense, a courier knocked on the door, prompting the men to flee. Paula handed over the package, her hands shaking with fear. She closed the shop, then called her mother, her voice trembling as she expressed her fear. Although her mother suggested reporting the incident to the police, Paula declined, attributing her reaction to mere fright, since nothing harmful had occurred. Instead of reopening her shop, Paula spent the day consumed by thoughts of Christian's actions and the identity and motives of the two mysterious men. Seeking comfort, she took a stroll through the city, stopping at a cafe for coffee and walking through the park to clear her head. Later, Paula visited her sister, and they had a heart-to-heart conversation over cups of tea, overwhelmed by the day's shocking events. Paula confided in her sister about the scary encounter at her shop, as well as her difficulties in her marriage. She shared how Christian had changed after her father's passing, indulging in alcohol and being openly unfaithful. Although she normally kept her personal struggles to herself, her emotions overpowered her pride and shame, allowing her to open up about the demeaning treatment she had been tolerating. Adriana Ortega, Paula's sister, later recalled that Paula had spoken about her long-term life plans, including her dreams for her daughters to grow up and become professionals. Adriana also remembered that Paula had expressed her intention to continue running her business. According to Adriana, Paula was a selfless and extremely hard-working person. After her emotional talk with her sister, Paula headed home. However, Christian called her, saying he was picking up their daughter from the playroom and would stop by the shop to pick Paula up as well. Their conversation was brief, with kids' voices in the background. Paula didn't get a chance to tell Christian about the scary incident at her shop, especially since she suspected he might be involved. Reluctantly, Paula went back to work, putting her family's needs before her own. Christian arrived alone, explaining that their daughter had wanted to go home, and he couldn't resist her. He told Paula that the kids were at home, eagerly waiting for hamburgers, a modern family tradition. Instead of going to the nearest fast food joint, Christian took Paula to the Courtyard restaurant at a nearby shopping center. He parked the car by a secluded wall, locked it securely, and left Paula inside to collect their order. Relaxing in the passenger seat after a long and tiring day, Paula closed her eyes, unaware of the danger that was approaching. Shortly after, she recognized two familiar figures standing near the car, talking loudly and circling the vehicle. She realized they were the same unexpected visitors who had come to her shop earlier. Paula tried to remain calm, trusting that the car was secure and that Christian would return soon. But suddenly, the car's lights flashed, and the door locks disengaged. Panicked, Paula scrambled to the back seat, hiding between the seats and covering her head with her arms, but she was trapped with no way to escape. One intruder casually got into the driver's seat, while the other joined him in the back, pinning Paula down even more. She felt something warm trickling down her arm before everything went dark. The attack left Paula with 11 knife wounds to her neck and 2 to her face. The assailants fled the scene, leaving Paula alone and gravely injured. Christian returned just 7 minutes later to a horrific sight. The car's interior was drenched in blood. Frantic, he called emergency services, but struggled to clearly communicate the situation and give the emergency coordinates. He then called Paula's mother to report the attack before driving to the hospital himself. Tragically, Paula succumbed to her injuries in the emergency room, passing away before receiving the necessary medical attention. Christian was overcome with grief and shock after losing his wife Paula, screaming and throwing chairs in the waiting room. The community was stunned, the family devastated, wondering who attacked Paula and why. Initially, the prosecution thought it was a robbery gone wrong, citing the stolen $600 and gold necklace. Security footage showed 2 men in hoodies visiting her store, but their faces were unclear. 2 months after Paula's death, her family sought justice, but the case stalled. However, Adriana, Paula's sister, revealed a crucial conversation with Paula, which cast doubt on Christian's innocence. She exposed Christian's infidelity and violence, and Paula's consideration of divorce, giving him a motive to kill. The prosecution then searched the couple's home, finding incriminating messages on Christian's phone and a document to transfer the company, which Paula refused to sign. After the incident, Christian was investigated for suspected homicide. New evidence revealed a complex web of deceit in the couple's relationship. 2 weeks later, it was discovered Christian had transferred $2,000 to an unknown woman's account, adding to suspicion. The most shocking aspect was Christian using Paula's account to make a payment while she was dying, instead of helping her. The woman who received the $2,000 transfer from Christian on January 2, 2005, was identified as 28-year-old Laura Castillo. She was questioned by the police and revealed that her bank card had gone missing a couple of days prior, but she hadn't thought much of it since her brother often used it. Despite denying any connection to Christian, Laura's solid alibi during the incident ruled her out as a suspect, and she was released. The case stalled again until Laura returned to police, saying her brother had given back her bank card. She described him, matching one of the surveillance camera images near the crime scene. One attacker had forgotten his hood, revealing Byron and Morton Castillo, repeat offenders with a long criminal record. They were arrested, leaving the question, what linked these criminals to respected family man Christian? Paula Ortega was a victim of a carjacking at a gas station on December 8, 2022. One man distracted her while his accomplice stole her car. Fortunately, her daughters weren't in the car. Surveillance footage identified the Castillo brothers, who targeted her before. Ironically, Paula had met them earlier that day. Christian's claim that thieves contacted him raised doubts about his innocence. He met them, recovering Paula's belongings, including her wallet. Experienced investigators were puzzled by Christian's boldness. Surveillance cameras identified the carjackers. Christian, under suspicion, created a new defense, claiming the brothers were extorting him. Police questioned suspects separately, telling them one had confessed. Martin Castillo buckled, admitting Christian paid him $2,000 to kill his wife, promising another $2,000 after. In a reenactment, Martin demonstrated how he inflicted 11 fatal stab wounds. He then calmly revealed the details of the arrangement. Martin also revealed that the theft of Paula's car and the attack on her shop were part of Christian's plan to put pressure on her. As it turned out, Paula lived a few hours longer than Christian had intended, on November 29, 2023. All three suspects appeared in court, where the prosecution presented a clear picture of the events surrounding the murder, pieced together from various sources. Forensic analysis of surveillance camera footage and audio recordings from the area where Christian had parked his car revealed a chilling and disturbing narrative. In a disturbing surveillance video, Christian Diego is seen getting out of his car and walking towards a shopping center elevator. Shortly after, he remotely unlocks his car from about half a block away, allowing two attackers to get in and assault Paula. The prosecutor's report highlights Christian's suspicious behavior after the attack, including repeatedly looking back, approaching the car, stopping, returning, pacing back and forth, and making phone calls. Remarkably, when he finds his wife bleeding heavily, he shows no shock or urgency to help her, instead driving her to a hospital that is far away. Christian's actions, meticulously recreated from surveillance footage, especially in the first 4 minutes after Paula's attack, are revealed to be cold and calculated as she remains alive but bleeding in the car. Standing nearby, Christian ruthlessly transfers money to his accomplices for their role in the assault. Paula's family lawyers are urging the court to consider these videos as factors that make the crime even more serious. The reconstructed sequence of events presented in court proves that the crime was planned in advance. Around 1:30 p.m., two individuals arrived at Paula's store, which happened to be near Christian's location. This suggests that the crime may have been planned to take place during the lunchtime closure when Paula was alone. However, prosecutor Marlon Calderon pointed out inconsistencies in the story, questioning how the assailants knew the couple would be at the store if they weren't following them, yet still managed to arrive on time to commit the crime. Christian's suspicious behavior, including not fully raising the car window, unlocking the doors near the store, pacing back and forth before helping his wife, making phone calls, and not seeking immediate medical attention at a nearby clinic, are key pieces of evidence that implicate him in orchestrating the murder. The trial of Christian and Paula Ortega exposed the dark truth of femicide, the intentional murder of women due to their gender. Despite Paula's professional success, Christian's youthful energy fueled his abuse and contempt towards her. Trapped in her own making, Paula enabled Christian's control until his sinister plot culminated in her tragic death. More than 10 witnesses, including neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, provided testimonies that, along with a thorough examination of internal and external family communications, revealed Christian's real intentions and goals. Without having the legal right to sign documents, Christian tried to force Paula to transfer her company shares to him. However, he failed. Although Christian did not physically harm Paula, he subjected her to severe psychological abuse, which he cleverly disguised as a perfect family life, as stated in the Prosecutor General's report. Video evidence led to Christian being placed in preventive isolation for being the mastermind behind the crimes. This measure is not the same as being arrested, but rather a strategy to neutralize a threat to society. After this action, Christian planned to flee the country. In the high-profile case against Christian Diego, who was accused of planning his wife's death, his defense team worked hard to portray him as a victim. However, they were unable to refute key evidence, including surveillance footage and fake company transfer documents. Desperate to avoid conviction, the defense attempted to portray the accused as mentally unstable, citing incidents of sudden rage. However, multiple psychiatrists evaluated Christian and deemed him competent to stand trial. As the situation grew dire, his defense counsel suggested he flee the country, asking if his passport was ready and proposing he buy a ticket to Panama for the next day. But this escape plan failed when Christian's search for Central American flight tickets alerted the authorities. The prosecutor swiftly detained Christian for 8 hours, then charged him and presented the case details to a judge specializing in domestic violence cases. Christian was held in preliminary detention pending trial, accused of being the mastermind behind a brutal act that left 2 young children orphaned and a family grieving the loss of their loved one. The Ortega family demanded justice for this heinous crime, emphasizing its devastating impact on the children and their loss. In a case that captivated public attention, the jury found Christian and his 2 accomplices guilty of a meticulously planned and intentional act of extreme brutality. The unremorseful trio was sentenced to 26 years in prison. The municipal authorities of Ruminahui offer their condolences to the family and friends of Paula Alcácer, who tragically passed away. They extend their deepest sympathies to those affected by her loss, an esteemed businesswoman, friend, mother, and wife who made significant contributions to the canton's development and brought prosperity to those around her. Paula's case highlights the disturbing trend of violence against women, as reported by the Latin American Association for Alternative Developments, which revealed a staggering 332 fatalities in 2022 due to gender-based violence. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Kendra Hatcher. Kendra Hatcher was born on February 3, 1980, in Springfield, Sangamon County, Illinois, to Reagan Hatcher and Bonnie Gibson Jameson Colley. Her parents divorced, and her mother later married Bruce Jimon. She had 3 sisters, Jamie Coleman Ashel Lepum, Melissa Jameson, and a brother, Neil Hatcher. Kendra grew up in Pleasant Plains, where she studied dentistry. After getting divorced in 2010, she moved to Dallas and started working at Smile Zone, a dental studio. As a devout Christian, Kendra wanted to use her dental skills to help others, providing free services to disadvantaged children at the clinic. In her spare time, Kendra was involved in various activities, including teaching Bible studies and participating in volunteer programs. These programs involved building churches abroad and providing free dental services to children in Ecuador. After moving to Dallas, Kendra's professional career took off rapidly. Her personal life also began to blossom when she met Dr. Ricardo Palacios through a dating app on May 24, 2015. Kendra and Ricardo shared similar values, interests, and life goals. Ricardo was completing his dermatology residency at the University of Texas Southwestern Medical Center. Despite having only been together for a few months, they were already discussing their upcoming marriage. A tragic incident in a parking lot took the life of Kendra, cutting short all their future plans. Upon arriving at the crime scene, investigators examined the evidence and initially suspected robbery as the motive, given that Kendra's purse and some valuables were missing. They found bullet fragments and a gun magazine near her body. However, the circumstances of the shooting and the bullet wounds suggested that robbery was not the primary motive. One bullet struck Kendra in the back, while the other hit her in the head. The entry wound was at the top of her head, and the bullet exited through her chin, indicating that she had her hands up and behind her head when she was shot. The murder theory was later confirmed when investigators obtained CCTV footage and reconstructed the events. The footage showed a black Jeep Grand Cherokee entering the parking lot at 7:15 p.m. 30 minutes later, Kendra returned home and parked in the same garage. Shortly after, a man approached her, shot her, and then ran to the side before jumping into the Jeep and driving off. Although the video quality was poor and the crime scene was not clearly visible, the authorities were unable to identify the assailant. However, they put the vehicle on a wanted list and appealed to the public for assistance. A man named Ortiz contacted the police after recognizing his car and footage related to the shooting. Ortiz claimed that, although the car belonged to him, he was not involved in the shooting and was not driving it at the time. He explained that, on the morning of September 2nd, he had lent his Jeep to two of his girlfriends, Brenda Delgado and Crystal Cortez, who asked to borrow it until the evening. Later that evening, Brenda called Ortiz to meet her at a restaurant where they were at the time of the crime. Meanwhile, Crystal Cortez drove the Jeep back to Ortiz's house. When Ortiz saw his Jeep on the TV news, he confronted Brenda, who initially denied that it was his Jeep, then admitted that Crystal had used it without his knowledge. Brenda tried to persuade Ortiz not to report the incident, offering to pay to have the Jeep repainted. At first, Ortiz was hesitant to get involved with the police, fearing it might jeopardize his pending U.S. citizenship. However, he eventually decided to cooperate and provided the police with the names of Brenda and Crystal. The police then tracked the movements of the Jeep on the day of the crime and located the two women. Brenda Delgado was the first to be questioned, but she claimed to have no knowledge of Kendra Hatcher and provided an alibi, stating she was at a restaurant with Ortiz at the time of the crime and produced receipts as proof. However, as the investigation continued, the truth slowly emerged, revealing the attempts by the perpetrators to conceal their involvement. Brenda Delgado came from a modest family. Her parents, Luis and Maria, immigrated to Dallas from Mexico, where her father worked in a factory. Brenda excelled academically and dreamed of attending medical school, but her parents couldn't afford the tuition. After high school, she continued to live with her parents, working as a dental assistant and at a spa, while still aspiring to a more affluent and beautiful life. Brenda balanced her dental assistant job with spa work, where she whitened her teeth. In 2012, she fell for Ricardo at a Jennifer Lopez concert. 3 months later, she moved in with him. Ricardo was smitten, meeting her parents, and Brenda gushed about her love in a Facebook birthday post. Brenda discovered she was pregnant, but Ricardo convinced her to have an abortion, leaving her devastated. After recovering from the ordeal, Brenda focused on her career and her beloved Ricky. She enrolled in Stanford that fall. Although it seemed like Brenda had moved on from the breakup, she was still hurting. Her obsession with Gerardo intensified, and when Ricky posted a photo with his new girlfriend, Kendra, a model-like beauty, Brenda was consumed by dark thoughts. Those close to her claimed she fantasized about harming Kendra. Investigators suspected Brenda had a strong motive to harm her rival. Gerardo confirmed that Brenda Delgado was his ex-girlfriend, and they had an on-again, off-again relationship from 2012 to 2015. They broke up a few months before Ricky met Kendra. Despite this, Gerardo believed he and Brenda remained friends and didn't think there was any bad blood between Brenda and Kendra. The reconstructed events revealed a disturbing picture of how manipulative and ruthless an abused woman can be. Brenda Delgado concocted a sinister plan to win back her former lover, Gerardo, and eliminate Kendra Hatcher, the woman he had moved on to. Initially, Brenda posed as Gerardo's supportive friend, pretending to take an interest in his relationship with Kendra. Unbeknownst to Gerardo, she gathered information about their future plans, which he naively believed was genuine concern. After Kendra's death, Gerardo confided in Brenda via text message, pouring out his grief. Brenda feigned sympathy, offering to help him in any way possible. Unaware of her true intentions, Gerardo trusted her completely. What he didn't know was that Brenda had been secretly manipulating him for months. She had been snooping on his mail, learning about his plans with Kendra, including their travel arrangements. This discovery fueled her anger, and she became fixated on eliminating Kendra, whom she believed had usurped her place in Gerardo's life. Brenda took control of Gerardo's phone account and used it to stalk him, keeping close tabs on his activities and those of his girlfriend Kendra. This obsession soon became her sole purpose in life. Brenda's fixation on stalking eventually led her to quit her job and dedicate all her time to achieving her twisted goals. Over time, she devised a cruel and terrifying plan to murder Kendra and take her place beside Gerardo. To put her plan into action, Brenda approached several acquaintances with an offer to harm Kendra in exchange for money. She eventually found a 21-year-old single mother, Crystal Cortez, who was struggling financially and willing to assist her. Crystal recruited a perpetrator, Christopher Love, who agreed to commit the crime. Brenda paid Crystal $500 and provided her with illegal substances, which Crystal then passed on to Christopher. Several women were tasked with following Kendra to learn her daily routines and identify the best location and time to carry out the crime. On September 2, 2015, they borrowed Jose's car. Crystal and Christopher lay in wait for Kendra in the parking lot, but lost their nerve and didn't follow her home from work due to fear of getting stuck in traffic. Later that evening, they finally carried out their sinister plan and were rewarded for their efforts. A few days after the crime, Crystal Cortez and Christopher Love were arrested. They both denied any involvement in the crime and claimed they were not at the scene. However, when the police found the murder weapon in the car, Love's story fell apart. Meanwhile, Crystal's alibi was inconsistent and confusing. At first, she claimed she was driving in the parking lot because an armed carjacker had taken over her SUV and forced her there. She even falsely stated that her young son was with her, but surveillance cameras showed no evidence of a child. As the investigation continued and more evidence emerged, Crystal changed her story again, this time offering to cooperate with the police in exchange for a reduced sentence. She implicated Brenda, claiming that she was the mastermind behind the crime and that they had been planning it for 2 weeks. According to Crystal, Brenda's obsession with winning back her ex-boyfriend, Gerardo, drove her to despise Kendra, whom she believed had taken her place. Brenda had pretended to be happy for Gerardo, but her life was actually unraveling. According to Crystal, Brenda decided to get rid of Kendra Hatcher at this point. In Crystal's testimony, she detailed how Brenda devised a plan to kill Kendra, enlisting her support. Brenda and Crystal started formulating a plan to kill Kendra, meeting several times and developing multiple plans. Initially, they planned to inject Kendra with illegal substances or sedatives and then dispose of her body. However, to avoid suspicion, Brenda needed a reliable enforcer and began looking for one. They drove around rough neighborhoods, asking people if they could help, which led them to Christopher Love, who agreed to help and participated in deciding the method of the crime. The three of them decided that shooting Kendra would be the quickest way to kill her. Crystal cooperated with authorities, revealing September 2nd wasn't a random choice. Brenda knew Kendra and Ricardo were going to Mexico, so they decided to kill Kendra before their trip. They wanted it to look like a botched robbery. Brenda and Crystal tracked Kendra's movements for days, noting her activities minute by minute. They traced her route home and entered the apartment complex's parking garage on September 1st, 2015, to set up the crime. Brenda and Crystal made a final check on the day of the crime. They picked up the Jeep and Christopher, dropping Brenda at the library to establish an alibi. Crystal and Christopher waited near Kendra's apartment, then followed her, losing her in traffic. They waited at her house, and when she arrived, Christopher shot her. Crystal claimed she didn't see it but heard the shot. She drove Christopher home, picked up her son, and returned the Jeep to Jose. Brenda's plan had finally come to fruition. She had eliminated her rival, and all she had to do was wait for a message from her beloved Ricardo. Brenda was thrilled to have committed the perfect crime. However, Crystal's subsequent confession and testimony against Brenda left no doubt about her guilt, and a warrant for her arrest was promptly issued. When the police arrived with the warrant, Brenda was no longer at home, having fled to Mexico using her dual citizenship. Brenda's involvement in a contract killing came to light after she fled, and on April 6, 2016, she was placed on the FBI's wanted list. With a $100,000 reward offered for information about her, she became the 9th woman to ever be listed among the most wanted fugitives, and the only woman on the list at the time. However, her freedom was short-lived, as she was apprehended just 2 days later in Torreon, Coahuila, by Mexican authorities, who extradited her to the United States on October 6, but only on the condition that she would not face the death penalty. Brenda was charged with capital murder in the U.S. At her 2017 Texas trial, relatives of Kendra and Ricardo spoke out. Witnesses testified, confirming Brenda's intentions and obsession with her ex. Her cousin Moses revealed Brenda's depression and her attempt to hire him to hurt Kendra. Brenda was obsessed with Ricardo, said friend Jennifer Escobar. Brenda read Ricardo's emails, tracked his movements, and had his house key and bank access. She asked Jennifer to kill or disable Kendra Hatcher, offering $2,000, a car, and drugs. Jennifer refused after consulting her parents. In court, multiple people who knew Brenda testified about her obsession, and it was established that Brenda had a motive to want Kendra dead. She viewed Kendra as an obstacle to getting what she wanted, specifically reuniting with Ricky. In the months leading up to Kendra's death, Brenda's obsession grew increasingly intense, as corroborated by evidence presented in court. This evidence included an ATM withdrawal receipt for $500, which Brenda later gave to Crystal as payment for her role, as well as a $600 cash payment received by Christopher Love. Furthermore, cell phone records revealed that Brenda, Crystal, and Christopher were together before the crime, with over 99 calls exchanged between Brenda and Crystal between August 22nd and September 4th, demonstrating their frequent communication to discuss the plan to kill Kendra Hatcher. Despite an alibi and receipts showing she was at a restaurant, the jury quickly found her guilty of Kendra Hatcher's murder. Delgado was sentenced to life without parole. Crystal Cortez, who cooperated with the investigation and pleaded guilty, received a 35-year prison sentence with parole eligibility. The Hatcher family expressed satisfaction with the court's decision and quietly left the courtroom following the verdict. On the other hand, the Delgado family, who knew Brenda as a loving daughter and woman with strong Christian values, refused to believe she was involved until the end. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Belinda Temple. 1986 was the year Belinda started her college education in her hometown. Unlike her twin sister Brenda, who attended Steve Austin University, Belinda stayed close to home. Her decision was largely influenced by her relationship with Marshall Kelmy, who was 3 years her senior. Belinda was deeply infatuated with Marshall, and this relationship began during her high school years. However, Belinda's parents were not in favor of this relationship. They feared that being involved with Marshall would hinder their daughter's opportunities for a prestigious education. They also worried about the potential consequences of an early pregnancy, which might lead to Belinda dropping out of college altogether. The disapproval of Belinda's parents led to numerous arguments at home. Belinda's mother was particularly opposed to the idea of her daughter moving in with Marshall before marriage. She made her stance clear by stating, "He is nobody to you. Once you're married, you can move out, but until then, you have a home here." This remark seemed to only strengthen Belinda's resolve. In a bold move, Belinda and Marshall announced their decision to get married during a family dinner. Despite the tension, they shared their plans, which was met with a heavy, uncomfortable silence. Belinda's mother was visibly upset but seemed resigned to their decision, gritting her teeth and remaining silent for the rest of the evening. In reality, Belinda had made up her mind to marry Marshall as a way to assert her independence and prove to her parents that she was capable of making her own decisions. They didn't have a grand wedding celebration. Belinda wore her sister's white dress, invited a few close friends, and she and Marshall signed the papers. Afterward, they strolled around the city, enjoying champagne and each other's company. The next day, Belinda packed her belongings and moved in with her husband, who was still living with his parents. They hadn't planned to rent a separate place. Getting married didn't change much in their relationship. As mentioned earlier, Belinda's primary reason for marrying was to gain independence and stop her mother's nagging. However, her new life turned out to be quite unpleasant. Less than 6 months later, Marshall started spending less time at home, claiming he was working late. In reality, he was seeing another woman. Belinda discovered this when she noticed her husband acting strangely. One day, she waited until his work hours ended and followed him, which is when the truth came to light. She saw Marshall walking hand in hand with a woman she didn't know, likely a colleague. The deceived wife, Belinda, left her husband, Marshall, after discovering his infidelity. She didn't create a scene, but instead packed her belongings and returned to her mother's house. Marshall tried to win her back, but Belinda was too proud to forgive him. They eventually got a divorce. A few years later, Belinda was pregnant and working part-time at a school. Despite her pregnancy, she was concerned about missing the upcoming basketball competition between schools and not being able to prepare her team properly. Her colleague, Richard Bachman, didn't share her enthusiasm and had often expressed his disinterest in teaching. Belinda couldn't understand why Bachman, a 40-year-old man who seemed uninvested in his job, still held his position. As a diligent teacher, Belinda noticed that one of her students, Riley Joe Sanders, a high school senior, had been absent from class for months. She reached out to her colleagues to determine if the issue was specific to her class or if Sanders was a habitual truant. Her colleagues told her that Sanders came from a troubled home and rarely attended school, implying that his absences were not Belinda's problem. That evening, Belinda decided to take further action. She visited Riley Joe Sanders' mother, who lived nearby, and had a serious conversation with her. Although the talk seemed to have an impact, it didn't quite yield the results Belinda had hoped for. Sanders began attending class and participating on an equal level with his peers. However, during a basketball game, when Belinda called out Sanders for pushing an opponent and exhibiting poor behavior, he responded with insults and threats, warning her to be careful, especially in the evenings. After her breakup with Marshall, Belinda had nothing left for her in her hometown. She decided to follow her sister to Stephen F. Austin State University. It was there that Belinda found her true calling. Alongside her studies, she worked part-time as a basketball coach and had high aspirations. At the same university, Belinda met David Temple. Like her, he was a part-time coach but for soccer, and he also played for the university team as its captain. Soccer had been an integral part of David's life since childhood, and it was clear even then that he was destined to excel. He consistently performed well for his team, earning the respect of all his teachers. Despite his difficult nature, which could lead him to insult or even physically confront others, David's behavior was often overlooked because of his on-field performance. During games, he would become fully engaged and find it difficult to calm down for a long time afterward. However, one of his teammates later revealed that David's aggressive behavior was due to his use of steroids. David's behavior changed significantly when he was with Belinda. He became a caring and chivalrous partner, but with one major caveat: he would become aggressive and confrontational if he perceived anyone as a threat to their relationship. Belinda was well received by David's parents, who admired her love for sports, a common interest she shared with their son. However, Belinda's twin sister and friends were less than thrilled about her relationship with David. They had known Belinda as a strong-willed and independent person, but since being with David, she had become more subdued and focused on pleasing him. Her relationship with her family also suffered, with less frequent phone calls and visits, which naturally caused concern among her loved ones. As graduation approached, David and Belinda adopted a bull terrier named Shaq. After receiving their diplomas, they got married in 1999. January 1999, David and Belinda Temple were expecting their second child. With the due date nearing, doctors predicted Belinda would go into labor within a couple of weeks. As with many pregnant women, Belinda was frequently exhausted, and caring for their son Evan added to her fatigue. One evening, David decided to give his wife a break from household chores and allow her some rest. To minimize distractions, David took Evan for a walk in the park. As they strolled through the fresh air, their hunger grew, so they stopped at a cafe for a snack. After their cafe visit, David and Evan headed home. Upon arrival, David noticed the front door had broken glass. He quickly told Evan, "I'm going to take you to visit Harland for a bit, okay?" Without waiting for Evan's response, David led him to a neighbor's house, where family friends lived. Evan, struggling to keep up, asked, "Why can't we go to Mom's?" David, unsure of how to respond, said, "Mom's in the hospital right now." The neighbor, Quentin Harland, had just opened the door to unexpected visitors when David rushed past him, taking his son into the living room without a word. David then ran towards his own house, leaving Quentin confused. Quentin shouted to his wife to care for the child and followed David. "What's going on?" Quentin asked, but before David could respond, they reached David's house, where Quentin saw the front door was broken. Upon entering, Quentin saw the house was in disarray, with open closets and belongings scattered everywhere. A trail of blood led to the stairs, prompting Quentin to push David aside. Under the stairs, in the dressing room, they found Belinda lying face down with a severe head wound. David, seemingly in shock, didn't react. Instead, he took out his phone and called the police. Police officers quickly arrived at the scene, but they were initially unable to enter the house due to the Temple family's aggressive bull terrier, Shaq, who growled and barked at the unfamiliar men in uniform. One officer drew his gun in response, but David intervened, shouting at them to put their guns away and rushing to restrain the dog in the garage. Upon entering the house, the police assessed the scene and concluded that the perpetrators were likely burglars who had not expected Belinda to be home. Despite her pregnancy, they had shot her to eliminate her as a witness. When police started investigating a crime scene, they were baffled by how the burglar got past the fierce dog, Shaq, that guarded the house. They were also unsure how the perpetrator distracted the dog. Upon closer inspection of the front door, police found broken glass, but its positioning suggested it was broken while the door was already unlocked, which seemed strange. Inside the living room, a box on the nightstand caught their eye, containing jewelry such as earrings, rings, and a gold chain. What puzzled them was why the thief left the jewelry untouched. As police spent more time in the Temple family home, they became increasingly convinced that the whole scene was staged. In their experience, thieves usually take all valuables they can carry, but in this case, nothing appeared to be missing. The presence of the dog continued to raise suspicions, leaving them feeling that something was off. Regarding the murder, Belinda was shot in the back of the head with what was likely a 12-gauge shotgun while kneeling with their back to the killer. However, shotguns are an unusual choice for robbers due to their bulk and difficulty in concealing and transporting. This, combined with the fact that the murder took place at 4 p.m., makes it improbable that a thief would be openly carrying a shotgun at that time of day. When questioned by police about firearms in his home, David mentioned owning a couple of rifles, which he showed to the officers. Notably, the shotgun that could have been used in Belinda's murder was not among the firearms he presented. David went to the police station voluntarily to give a statement and detail the items that had been stolen. Despite appearing nervous, he was cooperative with the police. During this time, his son Evan stayed at Quentin's house, oblivious to what had happened. In 1996, David Temple and Quentin Harland were neighbors and co-workers at a school. They were close friends and often socialized together outside of work, watching sports and hosting barbecues with their families. However, their friendship became strained when Heather Scott, a new teacher, joined the school. Quentin was attracted to Heather, but she rejected his invitation to dinner. What Quentin didn't know was that David had also developed feelings for Heather, and they started a secret relationship. Quentin was angry and hurt when he found out that his married friend, who had a son, was involved with someone else. Despite his feelings, Quentin kept David's secret, even as their co-workers began to notice the romantic connection between David and Heather outside of school. Heather didn't know that David was married, as he didn't wear a wedding ring and kept his personal life private. Belinda had no idea about David's secret life. She once confided in Quentin about her suspicions that David was cheating on her, but Quentin quickly dismissed her concerns. "You're just being paranoid," he told her. "David is a devoted husband and family man. How could you think such a thing?" However, there were signs that something was off. David, who had once been extremely respectful towards Belinda, now frequently insulted her, even in front of others. He would call her fat, despite her only gaining a little weight after childbirth, and would often ask her to leave the room when they had guests, implying that her appearance was embarrassing. Belinda didn't stand up for herself or have a serious conversation with David about his behavior. Instead, she cried at night and felt deeply unhappy as a woman. Meanwhile, David was enjoying his new relationship with Heather. David became increasingly estranged from his family due to a new relationship with a coworker. He put more psychological pressure on his wife, Belinda, and their communication consisted only of insults. Although he never physically harmed her, the verbal abuse continued. That year, Belinda discovered she was pregnant again. The news made her forgive David's past transgressions, and she felt ecstatic. David attempted to appear as a happy father, but it seemed insincere. Sometimes, he would not come home at night, and Belinda was afraid to ask why because she feared his angry outbursts and the potential scandal that could follow. A pregnant Belinda often asked her husband David for help in preparing for the baby's birth, such as running errands, fixing up the nursery, and installing shelves. However, David consistently ignored her requests, leaving Belinda to handle everything on her own, including shopping, painting, and assembling furniture, despite being 8 months pregnant. As Christmas approached, Belinda suggested discussing gift ideas with David, but he proposed skipping gifts that year to save money for the baby. Given the doctor's warning that Belinda might go into premature labor, this seemed like a reasonable decision. However, on Christmas, David didn't even get Belinda a small gift. Instead, he announced that he was leaving to spend the New Year's holidays with friends on a hunting trip. Belinda confided in her sister, who immediately changed her plans to be with Belinda, ensuring she wouldn't feel abandoned, especially since labor could start at any moment. David, during the holidays, spent the time with Heather, who wore a gold necklace given to her by David as a Christmas gift. By 2007, it appeared that David Temple had all but moved on from his wife's murder, as if Belinda had never been a part of his life. The fact that it had been 5 years since the murder and the killer had yet to be caught seemed of little concern to him. He had married Heather in 2001, and together they were raising Evan. The police suspected David of wrongdoing, but they couldn't gather enough evidence to prove anything. While investigating the case files of burglaries in the neighborhood, they discovered that a house on the next street had been burglarized 8 days before the murder at the Temple house. The perpetrator was none other than Riley Joe Sanders, a persistent truant from the school where Belinda taught, who had previously threatened her. He was called in for questioning immediately. Riley had no alibi for the day of the murder, and his father owned a 12-gauge shotgun. However, when the police searched the Sanders house, they did not find the weapon. Realizing the police had reason to detain him, Riley confessed that he was with friends on the day of the murder. He had hidden this information because they were smoking pot in a large group, and he did not want to implicate his friends. As a result, the charge against Riley was dropped. In November 2004, police officers arrived at David's doorstep, handcuffed him, and informed him that he was being held on suspicion of murdering Belinda Temple. David denied the allegations. His trial began in 2007. The investigation revealed that David's motive for the crime was his new relationship with Heather. Colleagues of David testified that during Belinda's pregnancy, he boasted about replacing his fat and pregnant wife with the younger and more attractive Heather. According to the prosecution, David killed Belinda as soon as she returned home from work, as evidenced by her still wearing her work uniform and shoes. They alleged that he then staged a robbery, scattering belongings around the house, before quickly driving to the park with his son to create an alibi. The prosecution also highlighted several suspicious facts, including that nothing was stolen from the house, and a fierce dog in the yard would have prevented any stranger from entering. Furthermore, witnesses reported seeing David's car stopped near a rice paddy, where the murder weapon was likely discarded, with only his son Evan present in the vehicle at the time. However, the shotgun was never found in the area where the crime occurred. Heather testified that before Belinda's murder, her relationship with David was not serious, and she didn't even love him. This statement introduced uncertainty into the jury's decision, as it raised questions about David's motive. Would he really kill his wife over a non-serious relationship, or was Heather lying to protect him? In November 2007, David was sentenced to life in prison. 2 years later, a friend of Riley Sanders came forward to the police to clear David's conscience. According to this friend, Riley had previously confided in him about taking his father's shotgun with the intention of robbing the Temple family home. Riley wanted to teach his teacher, David Temple, a lesson. Riley claimed that he had almost entered the house but was thwarted by a bull terrier that ran out of the garage. He shot at the dog but missed, and fearing the noise would attract neighbors, he quickly ran away. This new testimony was submitted to the court, prompting a review of the case. David was released from prison on bail while the review was underway. Meanwhile, Heather decided she no longer wanted to be married to someone who had spent so much time in jail and whose future was uncertain. She filed for divorce. The jury took a long time to deliberate on David's sentence. The case wasn't revisited until 2023, when David was still awaiting a final decision on his sentence. David was ultimately convicted and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 17 years. Throughout the trial, his son Evan struggled to accept that his father was capable of committing such a heinous crime. Evan continued to support his father until the very end. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Banaz Mahmoud. Banaz Mahmoud was born on December 16, 1985 in Iraq. She comes from an Iraqi Kurdish family with strong religious traditions. Her parents, Mahmoud Babakar Mahmoud and his wife, had 6 children, 1 son, Baman, and 5 daughters, Baza, Beel, Han, Jaban, and Banaz. They lived in a rural tribal area in Iraqi Kurdistan, adhering to traditional values, especially regarding women's roles. In 1995, when Banaz was 10 years old, her family moved to the UK. However, this change in location did not alter their deeply held religious and traditional views. Despite being in a more liberal European country, the family continued to reject modern opinion and lived within their tight-knit religious community. At 17, Banaz was forced into a marriage with a man 10 years her senior, who had recently arrived from Iraq. He did not speak English and lacked basic literacy skills. Banaz having met her future husband only 3 times before the wedding. Banaz, described as a girl with brown eyes, long dark hair, and a kind smile, followed tradition and moved into her new husband's home, despite him being a stranger to her. From the start, Banaz suffered physical and emotional abuse at the hands of her husband. Despite having lived in the UK and being aware of her rights, she was trapped in a cycle of violence. She tried to leave her husband multiple times, but her family forced her to return, as it was considered a disgrace for the entire Mahmoud family. With no support from her relatives, Banaz turned to the police twice, but they failed to take action, leaving her vulnerable to further abuse. In July 2005, after 2 years of marriage, Banaz finally escaped her husband's house and returned to her parents' home. After leaving her husband, Banaz felt a sense of freedom. She met Ramith Soleimani, and they fell deeply in love. However, they had to keep their relationship a secret. They would only communicate twice a day, exchanging messages in the morning and evening. Ramith was unlike the men surrounding Banaz, as he was calm, wise, and courteous. He treated she with great respect and kindness, instantly winning her heart. Before long, they began envisioning a future together, discussing wedding plans and a happy family life. They even chose names for their potential children. These joyful dreams brought Banaz happiness and gave her the strength to cope with the hatred and aggression from her family. In early October 2005, Banaz was walking down the street when she noticed a car following her. She recognized the people inside as Kurdish migrants sent by her father. Knowing her family's history, Banaz became terrified for her safety. On October 10, 2005, Banaz visited the police station again. During a 2-hour conversation, she shared detailed information about her life with her husband, including the physical abuse she suffered, her family's resentment, and the recent surveillance. She told the police that her husband had repeatedly beaten her, and during one incident, he nearly knocked out her tooth because she dared to call him by his first name in public. Banaz had previously informed the police that she feared for her life, but her concerns were ignored. The police failed to investigate her claims, neglecting to interview her family and husband to verify the accuracy of the information. She was told to contact them again if she felt threatened. Banaz and her boyfriend, Ramith, secretly met for about 2 months without being detected. However, in early December 2005, they were spotted by members of her family near a London subway station. This information was immediately reported to her father. That evening, her male relatives gathered at the family home, where they discussed her actions and deemed them unacceptable. Her uncle, Ari Mahmoud, declared that Banaz should be killed to restore the family's honor. Banaz overheard this conversation. Following this, Banaz went to the police again and explained that she had been under surveillance for months. She also told them that her family intended to kill her. She provided a list of 5 family members who were involved in the plot, but the police did not take her seriously. A serious mistake was made, which led to Benaz's disappearance. To uncover her fate, investigators must untangle a complicated network of lies, violence, and disregard for the truth. 2 weeks later, Benaz's father deceives her into visiting a relative's house, promising to discuss her divorce. Upon arrival, he forces her to drink brandy and leaves her alone in a room with the TV on. As she turns around, she sees her father putting on rubber gloves and reaching for a rope. Realizing her life is in danger, Benaz rushes to the front door, but it's locked. To escape, she breaks a window, cutting her hands on the shards. Benaz manages to reach a nearby cafe, where she collapses. Paramedics arrive and take her to the hospital, where the police are called. When Benaz regains consciousness, she contacts Rameth and asks him to come. After being discharged from the hospital, Benaz moves in with Rameth Soleimani. They celebrate the start of 2006 together and are happy. However, by mid-January, the Mahmoud family begins to pressure Benaz to return home, supposedly to mend their relationship and discuss her marriage to Rameth. Benaz trusted her parents and agreed to return to her father's house, believing her mother would protect her if her father became violent. To be safe, Benaz went to the police station again and gave a full statement, including the names of people she thought might harm her. Despite her fears, she returned to her family home. On January 22, 2006, Rameth was attacked by 3 men in the street who tried to force him into a car. He managed to fight back and reported the incident to the police. 2 days later, Rameth and Benaz were due to give a statement at the police station, but Benaz failed to appear. Rameth attempted to reach Benaz Mahmoud, but lost contact with her after she vanished upon returning to her family's residence. Rameth, who had been in constant touch with Benaz, grew increasingly worried and filed a missing persons report with the police. After numerous appeals, the police finally took action. The disappearance of Benaz Mahmoud sparked an investigation led by the Homicide and Serious Crime Directorate, with Chief Inspector Caroline Good at the helm. Initially, it was suspected that Benaz was being held captive in a house within the community. To locate her, Inspector Good organized an extensive search of linked to the Mahmoud family. Benaz's father, uncle, and ex-husband were brought in for questioning as suspects. The police also began searching for 3 other men listed by Benaz in December 2005, Omar Hussein, Muhammad Ali, and Mohammed Hama, all of whom were her cousins. However, when the police searched the neighborhood and tried to question her family members, and the family refused to cooperate with the investigation into her disappearance. Police found no photos of Benaz at her family's home, and her family's complete lack of concern shocked officers. Caroline Good then focused on 30 individuals, all of whom were arrested and questioned. During the investigation, over 20 vehicles and 300 cell phones were seized from those involved. Every person questioned attempted to hinder the investigation, providing conflicting accounts of Benaz's whereabouts. Some claimed to have seen her after she went missing, while others, including her mother, refused to cooperate with the police. Some even suggested she was in hiding. Realizing that no one would cooperate voluntarily, Caroline Good obtained permission to bug the cells of those arrested. At that point, Benaz's father, her uncle, and Mohammed Hama remained in police custody. 2 other men under investigation had managed to escape to Iraq. The detectives were horrified when they received the initial wiretap results. Not only did the 3 arrested men show no remorse, but they also took pleasure in recounting the details of Benaz's death. Their conversations revealed that on January 23, the Mahmoud family intentionally left their home, allowing Omar Hussein and Hama to enter. Once inside, they attacked Benaz, subjecting her to a 2-hour ordeal of beatings and violence. As the torture came to an end, Halma wrapped a cord around Banaz's neck and strangled her. When recalling the final moments of Banaz's life, Halma couldn't contain his laughter. However, it was Mohammed Halma's admission of being present when Rameth was threatened that became the turning point in the case. While Halma was being held in a cell awaiting trial, his phone conversations were secretly recorded. Caroline Good listened to these recordings with growing horror as the suspect proudly described the gruesome details of the murder. In the recordings, Halma provided a detailed account of what they did to Banaz. Despite being terrified and vomiting, Banaz remained silent. Halma then wrapped the rope around her neck 3 times, pulling it so tight that it dug into her skin. As he continued to speak with excitement, he placed his feet on her back and pulled and tugged on the rope. Banaz clung to life until her last breath. It took the perpetrators over 30 minutes to kill Banaz. The brutality of the crime was too much for Caroline Good and the detectives, and they couldn't hold back their tears. Banaz's cousin, Dana Amin, 30, was present in the house and helped the perpetrator put Banaz's body in a suitcase. Muhammad Ali then dragged the suitcase out of the house to a waiting car nearby. Halma revealed that a police car drove by, but the officers didn't notice the suitcase, which had hair and an elbow protruding from it. The very people meant to protect Banaz were involved in plotting her murder. They strangled her with a shoelace, stuffed her body into a suitcase, and took it outside of London. Snippets of conversation mentioned a derelict house with a garden in Birmingham. Caroline Good used the information gathered and matched it with the movement data from the arrested suspects' phones to identify the search area. Due to the vastness of the area, the search could have taken a long time. During a conversation with the suspects, one of them suddenly turned to the other and asked if they had put the freezer back where it originally was. This sparked an idea for Caroline Good, now knew what to look for. A police helicopter was deployed to scan the area and spotted a house with a backyard filled with trash, including a white oblong object resembling a freezer that stood out among the black garbage bags. Upon closer inspection of the suspicious house, the officers' suspicions were confirmed. The police officers began digging, but as the hole reached shoulder depth, they were on the verge of giving up, all except Caroline Good. She recalled the words of Mohammed Halma, who had boasted to relatives that he had buried the victim so deep that she would only be found with the help of an informant. Caroline Good convinced the team to extend the search for another day. On the evening of April 28, 2006, their persistence paid off, and the suitcase was finally found. Unfortunately, Banaz's remains were in extremely poor condition, making it necessary to rely on dental records and DNA samples for identification. Her body was discovered folded into a fetal position, hidden in a suitcase and buried beneath a freezer in the garden of a Birmingham house. On May 1, 2006, the suspects were formally charged with the crime. However, they displayed no remorse, convinced that their actions were justified. Mohammed Halma even claimed that the case would not go to trial, as he believed he was simply carrying out an act of retaliation. Meanwhile, Caroline Good faced renewed opposition from the Kurdish diaspora community. Following the discovery of Banaz's remains, numerous individuals came forward to provide alibis for the suspects, claiming that they were in public on the day of the alleged and therefore could not have committed the crime. Approximately 50 individuals were involved or connected to Banaz's death in various capacities. Reflecting on the events, Caroline Good recalled feeling intense anger, disgust, and contempt for the men involved. She noted that 50 men had participated in the murder of one woman, and they took pride in their actions, which they saw as a demonstration of their masculinity. In March 2007, the trial against Mahmoud Babakar Mahmoud, Ari Mahmoud, and Mohammed Halma began at London Central Criminal Court. Prosecutor Victor Temple described the crime as a cold-blooded and heartless execution that was orchestrated by the victim's father and uncle. In June 2007, a jury delivered finding all 3 defendants guilty of the charges and ineligible for leniency. The sentences handed down were severe. The father received a life sentence with a minimum of 20 years, the uncle was given life with a 23-year minimum, and cousin Mohammed Hama also received a life sentence with a minimum term of 17 years. Judge Brian Barker was scathing in his delivery of the verdict, stating, "You decided that your so-called family honor needed to be restored, which meant she had to die and her memory erased. This is a heinous and heartless crime. What kind of honor is it when a father prioritizes his social status over the life of his own child?" A mere 4 months after the trio's conviction, London police were informed that Muhammad Ali had been arrested in Iraq for a crime committed against a young boy. Muhammad Ali had taken his own life. Omar Hussein, the last of the 5 perpetrators, had been hiding in rural Iraq, attempting to avoid public detection. However, in December 2009, he was shot in the leg during an altercation with one of his brothers and required medical attention. Upon arriving at the hospital, police were notified and subsequently arrested him. Initially, Omar Hussein denied being in London in 2005, thereby claiming innocence in Banaz's death. But UK Social Security records revealed that he had been receiving refugee benefits during that time, contradicting his statement. The court ultimately sentenced him to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 21 years. Dana Amin was given an 8 years prison sentence for his role in disposing of Banaz Mahmoud's body and hindering the investigation. A recorded interview with Banaz at a police station implicated her family in the crime. Banaz had previously handed in a letter to a police station in South London, naming individuals who threatened to kill her and her boyfriend Rameth. The individuals named in the letter were from Banaz's family and the wider Iraqi Kurdish community. They were angry about her decision to divorce her husband, who treated her poorly. Despite several attempts to leave him, Banaz returned due to family pressure. The police failed to respond properly to Banaz's situation, which ultimately resulted in her death. However, this case prompted significant changes in how honor-related cases are handled. An inquiry into police misconduct was launched after Banaz's death, and an independent commission investigated 9 police officers for their inadequate response to her allegations. 7 officers received reprimands, and 2 were dismissed. It is essential to recognize the tireless efforts of Caroline Good and her team, who successfully located Banaz's body, secured the conviction of her father and uncle, and brought the escaped perpetrators back from Iraq. Banaz was laid to rest at the Merton and Sutton Joint Cemetery in Morden. A memorial service was held in her honor on June 26, 2007, at the MN Auditorium, followed by the installation of a granite memorial headstone at her gravesite. The memorial was attended by a small group of people, including Rameth Soleimani, Caroline Good, and Banaz's 2 sisters. Notably, Banaz's family did not attend either service. Rameth Soleimani, who had been living in the UK under witness protection, was profoundly affected by Banaz's death. He penned a heartfelt letter expressing his love and grief, describing Banaz as the love of his life and his entire world. Unfortunately, his pain and suffering continued, and in May 2016, 10 years after the tragedy, he took his own life. This was his 3rd attempt to end his life, a devastating consequence of the trauma he had endured. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Carmen Thomas. Carmen Thomas was born on October 30, 1987, in South Africa. Her life took a drastic turn when her father passed away when she was just 10 years old. Overwhelmed by grief, her family moved to live with relatives in Whitby, United Kingdom. However, the move did not bring the peace they had hoped for, and they eventually returned to South Africa. When Carmen turned 18, she decided to leave behind with her relatives and later relocated to London to pursue her education. She earned a master's degree in marketing and quickly became known for her charismatic and outgoing personality. Carmen formed strong bonds with many people and became a loyal friend and companion. However, living in a big city like London came with its expenses, and Carmen had to work hard to maintain a decent standard of living. By day, she worked as a marketer in a store, and by night, she worked part-time at a gentleman's club. Although her career choices may have raised eyebrows, Carmen was a woman of principle and never compromised her values. She conducted herself with dignity and earned the respect of her clients. It was during her time at the club that she met Brad Callahan, a charming and flamboyant man. Brad was born in April 1978 in New Zealand to parents who separated when he was just 9 years old. He stayed with his mother and later moved to Australia. Brad graduated from university in 2001 with a degree in construction engineering. He was then offered a job as a chief structural engineer for a large business complex in the UK by a prominent construction company. To navigate the complex's high-stakes negotiations and enhance his professional status, Brad sought the services of a gentleman's agency, where he met Carmen. She was intelligent, tall, and beautiful, with striking dark eyes and black hair. However, Brad's demanding career and ambitious nature left him little time for a serious relationship. Despite this, Brad and Carmen got along well after a dinner, and their casual interactions eventually blossomed into a solid friendship. Over time, their friendship deepened into a romance, and they began living together. Their relationship was built on mutual trust, care, and support. When Carmen got pregnant, Brad decided it would be better to go back to New Zealand, a country with cleaner air and a more laid-back lifestyle. In March 2005, they returned to Auckland. After the birth of their son Jack, they experienced immense happiness. They prioritized Jack's safety and well-being, making sure he had everything he needed for a happy childhood. However, the arrival of their son brought significant challenges to their relationship. The first problems arose in the relationship between Carmen and Brad due to disagreements on how to raise their child, causing tension and instability. After 3 years, they decided to go their separate ways, but shared joint custody of their son, Jack. The breakup was challenging for both, but they made a genuine effort to maintain a positive relationship for Jack's sake. Carmen and Jack eventually moved in with Colin, Carmen's half-brother, who also lived in Oakland. With time, Carmen regained her emotional balance and started a new life without Brad. In 2008, she and her son relocated to a house on a street near Brad's, so Jack could be close to his father. Having lost her own father at a young age, Carmen wanted to ensure Jack always had a father figure in his life. Despite her decision to live near Brad, Carmen's friends and family believed she and Brad still had a good friendship, but in reality, they only spent time together when it was related to Jack. As time passed, life continued for Carmen. After parting ways, Carmen and Brad each attempted to move on. Brad resumed his career as a construction engineer and, in May 2009, began a new relationship, which ultimately led to an engagement. Meanwhile, Carmen devoted herself to raising their son and, much to Brad's dismay, returned to her work at a gentleman's club. This choice troubled Brad. Carmen repeatedly presented Brad with ultimatums, but he dismissed her requests, focusing on his impending marriage and plans for fatherhood once again. This marked the beginning of adjustments to his financial commitments, specifically affecting the alimony payments for the maintenance of their son, Jack, which Brad made in accordance with their agreement. However, Carmen viewed the financial constraints as a catalyst in an escalating series of conflicts. Tensions escalated until March 19, 2010, when a domestic violence incident occurred. Police responded to a neighbor's call about a dispute and mediated the situation. As a result, Carmen received a formal warning from law enforcement. On June 29, 2010, Brad visited Carmen's house to discuss a new school for Jack and to sign a written agreement for child support. However, Carmen was unhappy with the document and asked Brad to leave, yelling that Jack was not his son as he departed. 2 weeks later, Brad tried to contact Carmen again, but she did not respond. On July 13, 2010, Brad reported Carmen missing to the police, who began searching for her. Through video footage and interviews with neighbors, investigators were able to reconstruct a timeline of events leading up to Carmen's disappearance. They discovered that on June 29, a surveillance camera at a nearby supermarket had captured footage of Carmen, providing a potential lead in the search. During their investigation of the rented house where Carmen and Jack lived, police noticed that there was no outdoor garbage can. Inside the house, they found bloodstains on the front door, washing machine, sink, and shower. To confirm the presence of blood, forensic scientists used luminol, a substance that reacts with the iron in hemoglobin. The test revealed multiple patterns of blood on the bathroom door and floor. The landlord reported that on June 29, she heard loud screaming, followed by prolonged crying and moaning. When she knocked on Carmen's door, no one answered. She looked out the window and saw a street trash can and an overturned drying rack, which caught her attention. She called her husband, but before he arrived, Brad walked out of the house, carrying soiled clothes. He told the landlord that Carmen had become ill after a medical procedure and had vomited blood. However, the landlord noticed that Brad appeared to have just taken a shower. She had no reason to doubt his story, so she didn't call the police. The search for Carmen continued, and her cell phone activity caught the police's attention. Although messages were being sent from her phone regularly, the tone and language used were unusual and didn't match her previous communication style. The outgoing messages and calls continued until July 10th. During further investigation, Carmen's car was found, and in the back seat, they discovered her luggage, clothes, and other personal belongings. The police investigation into Carmen's disappearance began with the examination of her seized suitcase, which revealed traces of blood and a note indicating she owed money to her employer. An envelope with Misty's name and $270 was also found in the glove compartment. Inspector Mark Benefield suspected foul play after finding blood in the car and launched a search for Carmen's body in the countryside southeast of Auckland, but it was inconclusive. As the investigation continued, police analyzed Carmen's and Brad's phones, discovering they had been in close proximity to each other during the search. However, Carmen's phone was not connected to a cell tower in Hamilton. A crucial piece of evidence was a missing trash can, which had disappeared from its usual spot near the house on the day Carmen vanished. A neighbor reported seeing the can being taken away through her window. Police suspected the trash can might have been used to dispose of evidence. When EE examined Brad's phone records and bank card details, then they found that on June 30th, Brad had purchased a meat cleaver, a large plastic container, and several garbage bags, which raised suspicions. By studying Brad's daily routine, police identified some unusual events, including a day when he arrived early at the construction site and walked alone around the property for an extended period. While it was not unusual for a supervisor to be on site early, the police found it noteworthy. After gathering evidence, including Carmen's cell phone and suspicious purchases, they began to suspect Brad of murder. They believed Brad had killed his former lover, Carmen Thomas, by hitting her multiple times in the head and then carefully hiding her body. On September 21st, Brad was arrested and charged with Carmen's murder and attempting to obstruct justice. Brad's second son was born while he was in custody, causing him to become emotional and resentful. 9 days after his arrest, Brad broke down and revealed to investigators the location of Carmen's body. It turned out that Brad had attempted to create an alibi by making it seem like Carmen had left for Hamilton and never returned. However, under questioning, he eventually detailed the events of the day Carmen was killed, revealing that his plan had not been as perfect as he thought. Brad admitted that Carmen and Brad had a heated argument, which ended with Carmen telling Brad that Jack was not his son. In a fit of rage, Carmen kicked Brad out of the house. However, he returned 5 minutes later, grabbed a baseball bat, and brutally attacked Carmen, striking her in the head with such force that she fell unconscious, bleeding profusely. Despite realizing the gravity of his actions, Brad continued to assault Carmen, throwing several punches. Memories of happier times flashed before his eyes, but his anger and resentment consumed him. Brad knew his life would never be the same after this moment, and he could never undo the damage. Nevertheless, he felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, believing that he had solved his problem and ensured that Jack was now his alone. Brad regained his composure, took a shower, and quietly left Carmen's house. In the following days, he devised a plan to dispose of Carmen's body and cover up the crime. He met his friend outside a supermarket and asked him to buy black garbage bags, kerosene, and cleaning products, hoping to avoid raising suspicion. Brad then returned to the apartment, meticulously cleaned up the bloodstains, wrapped Carmen's body in a bag, and disposed of it in a trash can. After killing Carmen, Brad dismembered her body into 8 pieces to make it easier to dispose of. He cut off her legs at the hip joints and then cut each leg in half at the knee. He also severed her arms and head from her torso. A few days later, on July 3rd, Brad met a friend at a boat ramp in Oahu Bay, near downtown Oakland. He confessed to his friend that he had killed Carmen during an argument and asked for help disposing of her body. However, his friend refused to provide a boat to dump the remains into the sea. Over the next few days, Brad drove to Ware Ridge in West Auckland and buried the dismembered body parts in a shallow grave. On July 7th, he drove Carmen's car to Hamilton and abandoned it in a hotel parking lot. He left a suitcase of clothes and some of her personal belongings in the car to make it seem like she had left voluntarily. However, he made a critical mistake by including bloody clothes in the suitcase. In an attempt to cover his tracks, Brad started sending text messages from Carmen's cell phone to her friends, pretending to be her. He claimed that she was not feeling well and had been in bad shape for days. However, this plan ultimately backfired on him. On October 1st, police excavated the burial site indicated by Brad and found the body of Carmen Thomas. Her remains were discovered in plastic containers, carefully removed from a makeshift grave on Wayfair Ridge. An autopsy revealed that Carmen Thomas had died from multiple blows to the head, with the fatal blow causing a compressed skull fracture. After multiple forensic examinations, Carmen's body was released to her family on October 13th. Tragically, her young son Jack, who had been waiting and hoping to see his mother again, was only able to hug and kiss her white casket. On February 8, 2011, Brad Callahan's first court hearing was held. Judge Winning determined that the crime was unintentional and took into account Brad's claim that he acted impulsively in a state of rage. However, the judge was more severe in his assessment of the subsequent cover-up. On May 26, 2011, Brad Callahan was charged with attempting to change the course of justice. A retrial was held on November 25, 2011, where police officers filled the High Court in Auckland. In a surprise move, Brad Callahan made 2 guilty pleas, admitting to murder and attempting to change the course of justice after Carmen's death. A judge has sentenced 31-year-old Brad Callahan to life in prison for murdering Carmen Thomas. Brad was also given a 6-year sentence for attempting to interfere with the investigation into Thomas's death. The judge considered this one of the most serious cases of attempted interference with justice, describing Brad's actions as extremely serious. During the trial at Auckland High Court, the judge criticized the brutality of Thomas's murder, but decided not to impose the harshest possible sentence. The courtroom was filled with Thomas's friends and family, including her parents who had traveled from South Africa. Judge Venin condemned Brad's attempts to cover up his crime, which involved considerable effort and deception. The 6-year sentence for interfering with the investigation will be served at the same time as the life sentence. In a statement, the Thomas family expressed their ongoing anger and grief, saying that no punishment can bring their daughter back. However, they are relieved that Brad will be in prison for a long time, giving him the opportunity to reflect on the harm he has caused. Little boy Jack Brad is living with his grandmother in another town under an assumed name. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Lindsay Cutshall. Lindsay Cutshall was born in 1982 in the small town of White Eyes, Ohio, to a devoutly Christian family. Her father was a pastor, and she was raised with strong religious values. Despite her strict upbringing, Lindsay was an adventurous and active child who enjoyed sports and later developed a passion for hiking and extreme tourism. After completing her education, Lindsay attended Appalachian Bible College in West Virginia, where she honed her outdoor skills. She regularly went on hikes, climbed mountains, and rafted down rivers, often organizing her own expeditions. Lindsay's dream was to establish a summer camp for children and teenagers, where she could teach them wilderness survival skills, rafting, and other outdoor activities. Jason Allen was born in 1978 in Zeeland, Michigan, to a deeply religious family. As a teenager, he became fascinated with hiking and wilderness survival. Jason was a tall, athletic, and charismatic individual who possessed natural leadership qualities, which drew like-minded people to him. He was passionate about exploring new heights and mastering outdoor skills. Lindsay and Jason met in 2002 during a hiking trip in the Appalachian Mountains. At the time, Lindsay was still a student, while Jason worked as a mountain guide and climbing instructor. They quickly formed a connection after meeting for the first time, leading the young man to ask for her hand in marriage just 6 months later. Both sets of parents gave their approval, and the young man proposed to his girlfriend with a beautiful diamond ring. Shortly after, he gave her a second engagement ring. As a couple, they made ambitious plans for their future. They intended to get married in September 2004 and buy a spacious house to raise a family. But things didn't turn out as expected. Before their wedding, they worked as senior counselors at a Christian summer camp called Rock and Water in California's El Dorado County. Their goal was to gain experience and eventually open their own camp after the wedding. On the Friday evening of August 14th, Lindsay and Jason decided to take a weekend trip to the San Francisco area. Before leaving, they informed their colleagues of their plans and left 2 experienced counselors in charge of the camp, ensuring a smooth transition. They told everyone they would return by Monday, expecting no issues for either themselves or their temporary replacements. With their plan in place, they set off in Lindsay's 1992 red Ford Tempo, and unfortunately, this was the last time anyone saw them alive. By Sunday evening, Jason and Lindsay, both counselors, had not returned to camp, but their absence did not raise immediate concern. It was assumed they would arrive late that night or early Monday. However, when they failed to appear at the Monday morning roll call at 8 a.m. and their phones were unreachable, their colleagues grew worried. The group quickly notified the police and then reached out to Jason and Lindsay's families to inform them about the situation. The parents went to the camp right away to get more information about the incident. Their colleagues were particularly concerned because Jason and Lindsay were known for their reliability and punctuality. If they had encountered any issues, they would have likely found a way to communicate. Upon arriving at the camp, law enforcement officials began questioning their colleagues, but the investigation quickly hit a roadblock. No one knew exactly where Jason and Lindsay had gone. They had planned to explore the San Francisco area, but their love for adventure and extreme activities made it likely that they were in a remote location with no access to communication or civilization. The police decided to wait for 48 hours, allowing the missing couple a window to possibly return home by themselves. In the meantime, concerned relatives and friends didn't want to delay any longer, and therefore decided to start searching. They reached out to everyone in their network, trying to gather information about the last time someone had contact with they. A missing person flyer featuring a photo of they was circulated, asking witnesses to report any potential sightings right away. By Tuesday, law enforcement had joined the search. The main focus was on the San Francisco area, its surrounding suburbs, and nearby localities. However, the large terrain made it challenging to thoroughly search every inch. A friend's insight that they frequently visited the secluded and picturesque rocky beaches led the police to concentrate on these locations. As the search effort dragged on for days, with several bodies found in sleeping bags in the targeted areas, the likelihood of finding them alive decreased significantly. On Wednesday, August 19th, a helicopter patrol spotted 2 bodies in sleeping bags on a remote rocky beach, indicating that the individuals were likely deceased rather than just resting. Upon arriving at the scene, police found a red Ford Tempo parked near a tourist shelter and a steep trail leading to a scenic beach. The car was identified as belonging to missing student Lindsay Cutshall after a database check. As officers descended the trail, they discovered 2 people in sleeping bags, who initially appeared to be sleeping. However, they did not respond to calls or noise. Closer inspection revealed that the individuals, a young man and woman, were deceased, with no signs of life. Preliminary examination suggested that they had been killed by gunshot wounds to the head, and the smell of decomposition indicated they had been there for over a day. All of their belongings, including phones, wallets, bank cards, and cash, were found next to them, ruling out robbery as a motive. The car keys were also visible, eliminating car theft as a motive. Investigators initially believed the deceased were the young couple who had gone missing near San Francisco the previous week. Documents found at the scene confirmed the identities of the victims as Lindsay Cutshall and Jason Allen. However, formal identification by their relatives was still necessary. When the parents arrived, they were overcome with grief upon recognizing the bodies of their children. The investigation led police to rule out initial theories of robbery or carjacking due to the presence of untouched valuables, money, and keys at the scene. Forensic analysis also showed no signs of physical or intimate assault on the bodies, except for the fatal gunshot wounds to the head. It appeared that Lindsay and Jason were peacefully sleeping and did not have time to react to the attack. They showed no signs of trying to defend themselves, escape, or even get out of their sleeping bags, indicating a sudden and deliberate act that was similar to an execution or a revenge killing. The brutal murder of 2 individuals on a secluded beach left investigators with many questions but no clear answers. The beach was difficult to access, and there were no signs of anyone else being in the area. Despite a thorough search, no shell casings were found, leading investigators to believe that the shooter may have taken them or thrown them into the ocean. The fact that the shots were fired at close range into the victim's head suggested that the casings should have been nearby if they hadn't been deliberately moved. A search of the area revealed an empty beer bottle a few meters from the crime scene. This was notable because Lindsay and Jason did not drink alcohol and led a healthy lifestyle, suggesting that the bottle may have belonged to the shooter. The brand of beer was unusual for the area and was more commonly found in a neighboring state. Although it was unclear whether the bottle was connected to the crime, it was considered a significant lead in the investigation. A theory emerged that Lindsay and Jason may have had a confrontation with someone the day before their deaths, and this person may have returned at night with a gun to settle the dispute. Although Jason and Lindsay were known for being friendly, it was possible they may have unknowingly offended someone. Additionally, the shooter may have been intoxicated or mentally unstable. Examination of the bullets found in the victims' skulls showed they came from a rare Marlin rifle, specifically a .45 caliber Model 18, produced in 1994 by Marlin Firearms Company. This type of rifle was typically used for hunting and was often part of a collector's arsenal. This discovery was a significant lead in the investigation, but it remained the only concrete clue at the time. Investigation suggested that the shooter was likely a lone male. He may have been a hunter, collector, or gun enthusiast. To further the investigation, authorities aimed to reconstruct their final route, identify who they may have contacted, and determine when they were last seen alive. Fortunately, they had taken many photos, and their camera was found intact among their belongings, which provided a useful starting point for tracking their movements. A guest book at a tourist cabin near the lookout point, where they had parked their car, contained entries expressing their delight with the weekend getaway. They had also visited a fishing pier about 20 miles away on Saturday, as evidenced by the photographs they took. Police officers returned to the pier and interviewed locals to find people who may have seen something significant. Several people remembered a young couple in a red car who inquired about overnight accommodations but found all 3 nearby hotels fully booked due to peak tourist season. They had dinner at a local restaurant, walked around the area, and took photos before leaving in the evening. According to those who saw and interacted with them, they was friendly, did not engage in any conflicts, and seemed carefree and happy. However, none of the witnesses could recall anything unusual or suspicious. The location where the bodies were found was a protected area, closed to camping. However, the young couple had nowhere else to stay overnight, so they decided to camp on the beach, using sleeping bags instead of a tent. They felt safe on the secluded beach on a warm August night and planned to return to the rock and water camp on Sunday. This information helped investigators narrow down the time frame of their deaths. Since they went to sleep but didn't survive until morning, it's likely they were killed between 11 p.m. on Saturday and dawn on Sunday. Despite the ongoing investigation and public appeals for information, police withheld certain details, including the results of the ballistics analysis. This action was taken to prevent the suspect from being tipped off and getting rid of the murder weapon before the investigation could start. The investigation first focused on a local homeless man who was known to sleep on the beach where the crime occurred. He was found and questioned by police, but despite not having an alibi for the night of the crime, he was not confirmed to be involved. The main reasons for this were that the murder weapon was never found and his DNA did not match the DNA found on a beer bottle discovered at the crime scene. The case went cold for nearly 2 years, but in the spring of 2006, police decided to release more information about the crime, including details about the weapon used. They also offered a $50,000 reward for any information that could help identify the perpetrator and solve the case. Following the public appeal, authorities received over 1,000 calls, but only a few were useful for the investigation. One individual, 26 years old Sean Gallen, drew particular attention from several locals who described him as an aggressive collector of firearms and blades. He was reportedly prone to conflicts, had a history of property damage, and frequently threatened violent behavior. The police investigated Sean Gallen and questioned him because they already knew him from previous incidents involving fights and drunk driving. Upon inspecting his possessions, Sean did possess numerous weapons but did not own the rifle in question. Authorities were unable to verify his whereabouts around the time of the crime due to the year gap, and his DNA did not match the sample found on the beer bottle at the crime scene, forcing his release. Meanwhile, international authorities were investigating another individual, 61 years old Joseph Henry Burgess, who made locals nervous due to his tendency to carry firearms and exhibit aggressive behavior. Burgess was described as erratic, often claiming he received orders from God, sparking suspicion that he could be the perpetrator. Joseph Burgess was living in Canada in the late 1970s, feeling lost and without a clear sense of purpose or direction in his life. In 1978, he joined the Children of God commune, presenting himself as a deeply devoted individual. Those around him considered him excessively zealous. A rivalry with 2 young members escalated into hostility, and shortly after, both individuals were found dead with multiple close-range gunshot wounds to the head. The circumstances of their deaths were particularly notable. Their bodies were discovered in sleeping bags on a beach, suggesting they were shot while asleep. By the time the authorities arrived, Joseph had disappeared. Although evidence left behind implicated him in the crime, he had already fled to the United States, crossing the border illegally. Joseph managed to evade capture for nearly 25 years until the police linked him to a double homicide in California. However, the opportunity to question him was lost when a shootout occurred during his arrest, resulting in the deaths of both a police sergeant and Joseph, who initiated the gunfire. This ultimately unresolved case remains shrouded in mystery. A 35-year-old man named Seamus Gallen was killed by his younger brother, Sean Gallen. The brothers had gotten into an argument, during which Sean, who was under the influence of illicit substances, shot Seamus 3 times with a gun. Sean had a history with the police, having been previously investigated for a double murder on a beach, but was released due to lack of evidence. Since then, Sean had been in trouble with the law twice for causing property damage and making threats, but only received fines. It was also discovered that Sean was an avid hunter and enjoyed making knives and other bladed weapons. People who knew him described him as antisocial, aggressive, and unpredictable. After killing his brother, Sean tried to run away but was caught almost immediately. The police decided to take another look at Sean's possible involvement in a crime that happened 13 years ago. They found useful information on his social media page, where he had posted pictures of his large collection of weapons and talked about his supposed psychic abilities. According to his posts, Sean believed he was on a special mission and was receiving instructions from outer space. Sean's behavior initially led police to suspect that he had serious mental health issues. He refused to cooperate with the investigation, spoke incoherently, and maintained his innocence. A new lead was found by investigators who examined private messages on the deceased brother's social media page, something no one anticipated. In 2006, a $50,000 reward had been offered for information about a double homicide case. Sean's former girlfriend had messaged his brother, suggesting that she could claim the reward by turning Sean in. It appeared that both the girlfriend and the brother had knowledge about the case, but they had chosen to remain silent. Unfortunately, it was no longer possible to question either of them, as the brother had been shot and the girlfriend had died in a car accident 2 years earlier. However, when Sean was shown the printouts of the messages between his former girlfriend and his brother, he made a shocking confession. Despite his initial denials, Sean began to provide a detailed account of the events surrounding the double homicide. His recollection of the details was vivid, even though more than 13 years had passed since the crime occurred. One evening, a man left his house with a Marlin rifle, planning to hunt in a nearby wooded area. However, after wandering aimlessly for a couple of hours, he decided to head down to a nearby beach, which he believed was a good spot to find wild boars. As he walked along the shore, he came across 2 sleeping bags with a young man and woman asleep inside. He stood there watching them for several minutes, when suddenly he heard voices in his head telling him to kill them. The man claimed that this was a mission from outer space that he had to carry out. So, he pointed his rifle directly at the young man's head and fired, instantly killing him. The sound of the shot woke she, but before she could even process what was happening, the man fired again, killing her as well. He then picked up the spent casings and put them in an empty beer can he had been carrying. Later, he threw the can into some bushes in his father's backyard, where he also hid the rifle, asking his father to keep it for him. Sean's father hid the murder weapon in the cellar of his old barn without asking any questions. Remarkably, Sean's account of the crime was later confirmed. When the barn eventually collapsed, the rifle was discovered at the site, and a beer can with shell casings was still hidden in the overgrown bushes in the backyard. The property's abandonment after Sean's father passed away in 2009 had helped preserve these key pieces of evidence. A beer bottle found on the beach was initially considered evidence, but it was later discovered to be unrelated to the crime. Sean claimed that voices in his head ordered him to commit violent acts and that he was not aware of his actions when he committed the crime. His defense argued that Sean was mentally ill and unfit to stand trial. The court relied on expert psychiatrists to assess the validity of these claims. The psychiatric evaluation found that Sean did indeed suffer from multiple mental health disorders, which were exacerbated by his use of alcohol and prohibited substances. However, the evaluation also showed that at the time of the crime, Sean acted with deliberation and careful planning, fully aware of his actions and the need to cover his tracks to avoid detection. Specifically, Sean deliberately killed the young man first, knowing that she would be less able to resist or defend herself if anything went wrong. Sean carefully removed the casings and handed the rifle to his father, instructing him to conceal it. Although psychiatrists diagnosed Sean with mental issues, they concluded he was mentally fit to stand trial and be held accountable for his actions. Notably, his family and former girlfriend were aware of or suspected his involvement in the double homicide, yet none of them reported him to the police. Sean's trial took place in the spring of 2019, nearly 15 years after the double homicide. On June 17, 2019, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms without parole, plus an additional 94 years for killing his brother in 2017. He is currently serving his sentence in a special prison unit for inmates with mental disorders. Due to his continued claims of hearing voices and aggressive behavior, he is closely monitored to prevent harm to himself or others. The motive behind the double homicide was never established. According to reports, Sean randomly encountered they sleeping on the beach and decided to end their lives without apparent reason. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Paula Salazar. Paula Salazar was born on September 6, 2015, in Venezuela to parents Andrina Bermúdez Millán and Leonardo Salazar. Her mother was from Machorena, Minagas, while her father was from Tucupito, a town in the state of Delta Amacuro. A year later, in September 2016, the family decided to move to Ecuador in search of a better life. However, their new life in Quito, the capital of Ecuador, was short-lived. Just a month after their arrival, the relationship between Andrina and Leonardo began to deteriorate due to various reasons. They eventually broke up, and Andrina decided to move to Cuenca, Ecuador's third-largest city, with Paula. A mother's friend kindly offered them temporary accommodation while they settled and found work. Meanwhile, Leonardo returned to his hometown of Tucupito in Venezuela. After spending some time, Leonardo decided to move to Trinidad and Tobago. At that point, Leonardo had already been dealing with a long-standing disability resulting from a serious motorcycle accident that occurred during his youth, which had left his left arm completely unusable. Leonardo struggled to find decent work due to his physical limitations. After Andrina moved to Cuenca, she almost completely stopped communicating with Leonardo, only informing him once that she had taken a job on a farm in Tapacundo. Some months later, Andrina formed a romantic bond with Washington Andreas Aymaro. Interestingly, Andreas happened to own the same farm in Tapacundo where Andrina was employed. When Paula was around 18 months old, Andrina moved in with Andreas, bringing Paula with her. Later, on April 7, 2019, Andreas and Andrina had a child of their own. The arrival of the new baby brought immense joy and unity to the family. Life was going smoothly for the family, with the farm thriving and everyone enjoying each day. However, their happiness was short-lived. On March 27, 2020, a life-altering event occurred, changing the course of their lives forever. On that fateful day, Andreas took Paula to the flower plantations. During the car ride, Paula suddenly became ill, feeling dizzy and nauseous. Andreas was forced to stop at a public restroom, where Paula vomited again. He decided to leave her alone for a few minutes to retrieve a change of clothes from the car, as Paula's clothes were soiled. When Andreas returned, he found Paula lying with her head in the toilet bowl. He pulled her out and attempted to administer first aid before rushing her to the hospital. However, by the time they arrived, Paula had already passed away. The doctors who examined her body noticed that Andrea's story didn't add up. They found bruises on Paula's body and face that couldn't have been caused by the events Andreas described. As a result, the doctors contacted the police, who arrived soon after and arrested Andreas as a suspect in Paula's murder. The autopsy later revealed that Paula's death was not an accident, contradicting Andreas' claim that she had drowned in the toilet bowl. The autopsy results revealed that she had been dead for approximately 24 hours before arriving at the hospital, contradicting the foster father's claim that he had administered first aid and CPR just 20 minutes prior to hospitalization. The autopsy also showed that she had suffered severe injuries, including broken ribs, multiple microtraumas, a cracked spine, and sepsis, which ultimately led to her death. Paula's death was initially reported as an accident, but an examination of her body revealed numerous injuries, both old and new. Leonardo Salazar, Paula's father, did not learn of her death until 33 days after it occurred. After Leonardo left Ecuador, Andrina began a new relationship and severed all ties with him. As a result, Leonardo was unaware of Paula's tragic fate for 3 days. During this time, he could only keep up with Paula through photos sent to him by Andrina and their mutual friends. Leonardo learned of his daughter's death. But Andrina's family told him a different story, claiming Paula had died from -19 complications. During this time, Ecuador was under quarantine due to the pandemic, like the rest of the world. But unusually, there were very few -19 deaths in the country. Leonardo was naturally skeptical about his daughter's alleged cause of death and quickly began researching Ecuador's -19 mortality statistics, which were publicly available on social media. Leonardo reached out to Andrina every day for 10 days, but she didn't return his calls until he'd been trying to contact her for almost 2 weeks. When they finally spoke, Andrina told him that Paula had died from -19, but she claimed her lawyers wouldn't allow her to share more information. On the same day she contacted Leonardo, she visited the morgue to begin making arrangements for her daughter's funeral. Despite a prosecutor requesting more time to examine the body, the funeral proceeded on April 10, 2020. Andrina refused to allow a second autopsy to be performed. Through social media and friends, Andrina's friends contacted Leonardo, sharing information about Paula's difficult life in the years before her death. They provided Leonardo with the details they had gathered, which included recordings of conversations, photos, audio recordings, and other similar evidence. According to witnesses, Paula faced mistreatment not only from her stepfather but also from her own mother. Observers reported that Paula was only seen happy when she played alone around Andreas, suggesting that her distress occurred during interactions involving multiple individuals, especially when Andreas was near Andrina. Typically, Paula appeared depressed, acted shyly, and became easily startled. She eventually confided in acquaintances that her mother and stepfather physically punished her for misbehaving. She further revealed that Andreas once pushed her as punishment, causing her to hit her head against the wall. She expressed her deep-seated fear of Andreas by calling him a monster. Paula was plagued by nightmares and struggled with insomnia. When she moved into her Andrina's home, her parents initially required her to sleep alone, ignoring her cries when she had trouble falling asleep. They also refused to help her get tucked into bed, leaving her to do it on her own. Furthermore, her mother, Andrina, had begun teaching her how to cook at an unreasonably young age. Paula was forced to prepare her own breakfast and dinner, as her mother preferred to sleep in late and take breaks from childcare in the evenings. Andrina seemed unconcerned about the dangers of having a preschool-aged child cook for herself, despite the risks involved. This neglect was part of a larger pattern of indifference towards Paula's well-being, as Andrina simply did not want to care for her daughter. A young girl repeatedly complained of pain in her legs and back to her teacher, claiming she couldn't walk. Due to her persistent complaints and visible bruises, the teacher took her to the school's health center. After an examination, doctors suspected she was being mistreated at home. The teacher contacted a special police unit to investigate her family for potential abuse. Authorities took up the case and temporarily relocated she to a safe location while the investigation was ongoing. On October 16, 2019, she, Paula, was temporarily placed with her uncle, Andrina's brother. A court hearing was scheduled for December 4, 2019, but the teachers who were set to testify failed to appear. As a result, the hearing was rescheduled for February 27, 2020. Unfortunately, the teachers didn't show up again, and the court was forced to drop the charges against Paula's parents. With no evidence, Paula was returned to her mother. Tragically, 1 month later, on March 27, she passed away. Following Paula's death, Andreas was initially placed in protective custody during the investigation. However, he later appealed this decision, leading to a court hearing on June 12, 2020. During the video conference hearing, the judge set a restraining order and decided that Andreas could be released to house arrest. Yet, in a surprise move, Andreas dropped his appeal. Meanwhile, Leonardo was running a social media campaign and sought financial support to travel from Trinidad and Tobago to Ecuador, with the goal of filing a complaint against Andrina, Paula's mother, before it was too late. At the time, Andrina had not been charged and was free. Leonardo was fortunate to receive financial assistance and free legal advice from two kind-hearted Ecuadorian lawyers, Oswaldo and Alejandro. To reach Ecuador, he had to take a perilous journey from Trinidad to Venezuela, crossing the border by raft and then continuing on to San Cristobal. Leonardo started his journey into Caira and entered Colombia, then traveled through rugged terrain to reach Ipiales. From there, he made his way to the Rumichaca Bridge, which marks the border with Ecuador, and eventually arrived in Quito, where he met with a lawyer on June 30th. Meanwhile, a formal complaint had been filed by Leonardo against Andrina, and as a result, Andrina was charged on July 6, 2020, and was subsequently put under house arrest. Andrina and Andreas were charged with murder, an offense that carries a maximum prison sentence of 13 years. In November 2020, Leonardo's lawyer raised concerns about the possibility of Andrina fleeing the country due to a past incident where she attempted self-harm. As a precaution, the judge ruled in favor of fitting Andrina with an electronic monitoring device, reducing the need for her to attend court hearings twice a week, making them only once a week instead. Andrina later asked the judge to reconsider the decision to wear an electronic monitoring device. A second hearing was held on November 16 to consider this request. Despite these delays, the judge eventually scheduled a trial for December. Due to the pandemic dominating the news, some key events were not reported. The trial began on January 14, 2021, with Andreas being held at the Regional Detention Center. The trial was closed to the public and no media representatives were present. Some participants joined via video link. The autopsy report revealed that Paula had suffered severe and brutal injuries, including damaged spinal discs, broken ribs, and previous fractures that had healed. However, the infection that caused her death was a result of injuries she sustained later on. The report also confirmed that Paula had been dead for approximately 24 hours by the time Andreas took her to the hospital. The extent of her injuries indicated extreme cruelty and brutality. Additionally, the autopsy showed that Paula was severely malnourished, underweight, and deficient in essential minerals and nutrients, with her physical condition being significantly worse than expected for her age. Paula's mother, Andrina, dismissed the severity of Paula's injuries and instead implied that Paula's issues were psychological and that she hurt herself intentionally to seek attention. Andreina attributed the change in Paula's behavior to her feeling neglected after her brother was born. Just a few months after Leonardo left Ecuador in 2017, she began to experience abuse. It is likely that the abuse started immediately after her mother, Andreina, started a relationship with Andreas. Over 40 witnesses testified against Andreina and Andreas, confirming that Paula suffered abuse for at least 3 years. At the final hearing before the verdict, Andreina took sole responsibility for the abuse, claiming she was the one who hit Paula with a belt in her fists. She claimed Andreas was innocent and had never mistreated Paula. Andreina also stated that she punished Paula for causing problems in her relationship with Andreas. The judges were concerned about Andreina and Andreas' newborn son, but it was clear that the child had not been abused like Paula. Andreas has chosen to remain silent about the incident since his arrest on February 3, 2021. The trial for Paula's murder was concluded, and both defendants were found guilty. The maximum sentence for this crime is 13 years, but the chief judge considered an aggravating factor. Paula was only 4 years old